The church doors swung open to a scene of absolute chaos. Mara Whitlock stood frozen in the doorway, her sister's abandoned wedding dress pooling at her feet like spilled milk. 200 people stared. The groom, a man she'd never spoken to, stood rigid at the altar, holding an infant that wouldn't stop screaming. Her sister was gone. The money was gone. And every eye in that frontier town was turning toward her with the same venomous question. What are you going to do about this? If you want to see how this impossible situation unfolds, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The morning had started wrong. Mara knew it the moment she woke to silence. Her sister Clara's bed was empty, sheets thrown back in a tangle that looked almost violent. The small room they shared above the general store felt too still, like the air after lightning strikes but before the thunder comes. She sat up, pressing her palm against the mattress where Clara should have been. Cold. Had been cold for hours. "Clara?" No answer. Just the creaking of floorboards below as Mr. Henderson opened the store the same way he had every morning for 20 years. Routine sounds, normal sounds. But nothing about this morning felt normal. Mara swung her legs out of bed, her bare feet hitting the rough wooden floor. The wedding dress hung on the wardrobe door, white fabric glowing in the early light like a ghost. Clara had spent weeks on that dress, stitching lace she'd ordered all the way from St. Louis, taking it in and letting it out as she changed her mind about the fit. Obsessing over it the way she obsessed over everything that made her the center of attention. The dress was still there. Clara was not. Mara moved to the window, pulling back the thin curtain. Main Street stretched below, already busy despite the early hour. Half the town would be heading to the church soon. Clara's wedding was the biggest event Cedar Ridge had seen in months. Maybe years. A white woman marrying Taza Nantan, an Apache rancher who'd built something real on land most folks said couldn't be farmed. People had been talking about it for weeks. Opinions split sharp as axe blades. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her breath fogging the window. Where would Clara go? Where could she go? The nearest town was a day's ride, and Clara had never saddled a horse in her life without complaining about it for a week afterward. Then Mara saw it. The ledger on Clara's dresser, lying open, the household money tin beside it. Empty. Her stomach dropped. She crossed the room in 3 steps, grabbed the ledger, flipped through pages she'd written herself. She'd been keeping the household accounts since their mother died 2 years ago, careful records of every cent earned and spent. The last page made her hands shake. Withdrawn, $340. For wedding expenses. Except there'd been no wedding expenses worth $340. The dress fabric had cost $18. The church was free. Mrs. Patterson was making the cake as a gift. Clara had been skimming money for weeks, maybe months, writing false entries that Mara had been too trusting to question. No, the word came out as a whisper. No, no, no. She spun toward the wardrobe, yanked it open. Clara's traveling bag, the good leather one their father had bought her for her 18th birthday, was gone. Most of her everyday dresses, gone. The silver hairbrush, gone. The cameo necklace that had belonged to their grandmother, gone. But the wedding dress remained, hanging there like an accusation. Mara's mind raced. This wasn't a bride getting cold feet. This was planned, calculated. Clara had been planning to run, and she'd been stealing to fund it, and she'd waited until the very last moment to... A cry split the silence, high-pitched, angry, unmistakable. The baby. Mara ran to the corner where they'd set up the small cradle. Little Thomas, Clara's son, 3 months old, red-faced and furious, tiny fists waving. He'd been crying for a while. His face was blotchy, his swaddling blanket kicked off. Shh, shh. It's okay. Mara lifted him, and he was hot to the touch, probably hungry, definitely wet. She bounced him automatically, the motion she'd learned over the past 3 months of being more mother to this child than Clara had ever bothered to be. Clara had a baby, with Taza Nantan. That's why there was a wedding today. That's why a man who barely spoke had agreed to marry a woman who never stopped talking. That's why half the town had opinions they weren't shy about sharing, and now Clara was gone. What do I do? Mara asked the baby, who just screamed louder. What am I supposed to do? A knock thundered on the door downstairs. Heavy. impatient. Mara? Mara Whitlock? Mr. Henderson's voice, urgent. Is Clara ready? The church sent someone. They're asking why she's not there yet. Her throat closed. She looked at the baby in her arms, at the empty room, at the wedding dress that would never be worn. She had maybe 10 minutes before someone came upstairs. 10 minutes to figure out how to explain that the bride had vanished, that she'd stolen everything that wasn't nailed down, that she'd abandoned her own child without a second thought. 10 minutes before Mara's life became something she couldn't recognize. The church was packed. Mara stood in the small antechamber off the main sanctuary. Thomas quiet now in her arms. She'd fed him, changed him, wrapped him in the good blanket. She could hear the murmur of voices through the wall, 200 people waiting for a ceremony that wasn't going to happen. Reverend Matthews stood beside her, his usually calm face drawn tight with stress. You're certain she's gone? Maybe she just went for a walk, needed to clear her head. Her bag is gone, her clothes, the money. Mara's voice came out flat. She planned this. But the baby, I know. And Mr. Nantan is, I know. The Reverend ran his hand over his face. He was a good man, genuinely kind, but he looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. We have to tell them something. We can't just... People have been sitting there for 40 minutes. Some traveled since yesterday to be here. Mara shifted Thomas to her other arm. The baby looked up at her with dark eyes. Taza's eyes. She'd only seen the son a handful of times, always at a distance. He wasn't from town. He kept to his ranch, came in for supplies maybe once a month, spoke to no one unless he had to. Clara had met him at the harvest dance last fall, had talked about nothing else for weeks after. He's different, Clara had said, eyes bright with that manic energy she got when she wanted something. Not like the boys here. He's real. Real. What a word. Clara wouldn't know real if it bit her. Miss Whitlock? The Reverend was waiting. Mara took a breath. I'll tell them. You don't have to. She's my sister. It should come from me. It was the last thing she wanted to do. But someone had to. And if there was one thing Mara had learned in 22 years of being the forgettable Whitlock sister, it was that when things fell apart, she was the one who cleaned up the mess. The Reverend opened the door to the sanctuary. The murmuring stopped instantly. 200 faces turned toward her, curious, expectant, already starting to frown at the sight of her instead of Clara. The church was beautiful. Mrs. Patterson and her daughters had spent all yesterday decorating. Wildflowers in mason jars lined the windowsills. White ribbons hung from the pew ends. Someone had even found candles, lit them despite the morning sun streaming through the windows. And at the altar, standing perfectly still, was Taza Nantan. Mara's breath caught. She'd forgotten how tall he was, how broad. He wore a black suit that looked new, probably bought special for today. His dark hair was pulled back, revealing a face that could have been carved from stone. He wasn't handsome in any conventional way. His features were too harsh, too angular. But there was something about him that made it hard to look away. He was staring directly at her, not at the baby, at her. Mara forced herself to walk down the aisle. Every step echoed. She was intensely aware of her plain brown dress, her hair hastily pinned, the fact that she hadn't slept well in weeks because the baby kept waking and Clara would just put the pillow over her head and tell Mara to deal with it. She reached the front, stopped. The Reverend came to stand beside her, but it was Taza she had to look at. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Easily 6 inches taller than her, and she wasn't short. His face gave away nothing, but his hands, hanging at his sides, were clenched into fists. Mr. Nantan, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, louder. I'm sorry. Clara is... She's gone. She left. I don't know where. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Then the whispers started. Gone? What does she mean, gone? The baby. Is that the baby? She ran off today, on her wedding day? I knew it. I told you this was a bad idea. Poor man, humiliated in front of everyone. That family never did have any shame. The voices built, overlapping, getting louder. Mara felt her face burning. She tried to keep her eyes on Taza, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring past her, toward the back of the church, like you might see Clara materialize if he looked hard enough. She took money, Mara continued, because someone had to say it. A lot of money. And her things. She planned this. A gasp from somewhere in the crowd. Then, stole? She's a thief? Abandoned her own baby? What kind of woman? Trash. That whole family is trash, and Mara flinched. The baby shifted in her arms, making a small sound, and she held him closer. She wanted to defend Clara, to explain, to make this somehow less awful. But there was nothing to say. Clara had stolen, had abandoned her child, had humiliated this man and wasted everyone's time. Mrs. Patterson stood up in the third row. Well, I suppose we should all just go home then. What a waste. Others started rising. The murmurs turned into full conversations. People shaking their heads, shooting looks at Mara that ranged from pity to disgust. She stood there, holding Thomas, feeling like she was made of glass and someone was about to throw a stone. Then Taza moved. He didn't speak. He just walked past her, toward the back of the church, his footsteps heavy on the wooden floor. Mara turned to watch him go, assuming he was leaving, that this nightmare was over and she could collapse somewhere private. But he stopped at the church doors, turned around. Everyone sit down. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade, and every person in that church froze. Sit. Down. They sat. Even Mrs. Patterson, who never did anything she didn't want to do, lowered herself back onto the pew. Taza walked back up the aisle. He stopped directly in front of Mara, so close she had to tilt her head back to see his face. His eyes were black, unreadable. You're her sister. It wasn't a question, but Mara nodded anyway. You've been taking care of the baby. Another nod. Her throat was too tight to speak. You work at the store, keep the books. Clara didn't do any of that. How did he know that? Had he been watching, asking questions? No, Mara managed. Clara didn't like numbers. Something flickered in his expression, almost like dark humor. Clara didn't like a lot of things. The church was so quiet, Mara could hear her own heartbeat. Taza looked at the baby in her arms, then back at her. What's your name? Mara. Mara, he repeated, like he was testing how it sounded. Then he turned to face Reverend Matthews. We're still having a wedding. The Reverend's eyes went wide. I'm sorry, what? A wedding, right now. Taza gestured toward Mara. With her. The church erupted. You can't be serious. She's not the mother. This is insane. Mara couldn't breathe. She stared at Taza, certain she'd misheard. You can't mean... My son needs a mother. You've been acting as one already. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. You're here. She's not. Unless you have objections. Did she have objections? She had about 1,000. This was crazy. They didn't know each other. She'd never even spoken to him before 5 minutes ago. People didn't just marry strangers because the original bride ran off. But then she looked down at Thomas, who was watching her with those solemn, dark eyes, and she thought about what would happen if she said no. She'd go back to the room above the store, alone, with a baby that wasn't hers, but that she'd been caring for anyway, because Clara couldn't be bothered. She'd face the whispers, the judgment, the assumption that she'd known about Clara's plan, maybe even helped. The Whitlock name was mud in this town now, and she was the only Whitlock left to carry it. Or she could say yes to this strange, silent man who was offering her, what? A way out? A purpose? A reason to hold her head up? Her voice shook. She cleared her throat, tried again. I don't know you. No, Taza agreed. But you'll learn, and I'll learn you. That's how marriage works. Not usually right away. It doesn't. Was that almost a smile? His mouth didn't move, but something shifted in his eyes. Nothing about this is usual. True. Very true. Reverend Matthews stepped forward, hands raised. Now, let's think about this rationally. Marriage is a sacred commitment. You can't just substitute one bride for another. Why not? Taza's gaze didn't leave Mara's face. She's of age. She's here. The baby knows her, unless she's already promised to someone? No, Mara said quietly. She'd never been promised to anyone, never been courted, never been the girl anyone looked at twice. Clara was the pretty one, the charming one. Mara was the one who made sure the bills got paid and the laundry got done. Then we're wasting time. Taza turned back to the Reverend. Marry us. I need her consent, Mara. The way he said her name made her skin prickle. You want to marry me? It was the most absurd question she'd ever been asked. Want had nothing to do with this. Want was a luxury. This was survival. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, yes. The Reverend looked like he might faint. This is highly irregular. This whole situation is irregular. Mrs. Patterson stood again, and this time her face held something different. Calculation. But if Mr. Nanton is willing to take responsibility for the child, and Miss Whitlock is agreeable, then perhaps it's the best solution for everyone involved. Martha, her husband started. Think about it, Harold. The alternative is that child becomes a ward of the town, and we all know what happens to those children. This way, he has a family, strange as it may be. Other voices joined in. She's right, it's practical, Set. Better than the scandal of raising a bastard alone. Mr. Nanton's ranch is prosperous. She'd be taken care of. At least someone's willing to clean up this mess. Mara felt dizzy. This was happening too fast. Everything was happening too fast. But Taza's hand was suddenly on her elbow, steadying her, and he was guiding her to stand beside him at the altar, and Reverend Matthews was opening his Bible with shaking hands. If you're both certain, we are, Taza said. Mara couldn't speak. She just nodded. Then I suppose, let us begin. Dearly beloved. The Reverend's voice washed over her. She heard maybe one word in three. The rest was just noise, mixing with the thundering of her pulse and the small sounds Thomas made as he settled against her chest. This wasn't how she'd imagined a wedding. She'd imagined it, of course. Every girl did. She'd pictured herself in a nice dress, maybe not as fancy as Clara's, but something pretty. She'd pictured a man who loved her, who'd courted her properly, who looked at her like she mattered. Not this. Not standing in a church full of strangers who'd just watched her sister destroy whatever dignity their family had left. Not marrying a man she didn't know to save a baby who wasn't hers. But when Taza took her free hand, his palm rough with calluses, his grip warm and surprisingly gentle, something in her chest unclenched. Do you, Mara Whitlock, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? The words stuck in her throat. She looked up at Taza, searching his face for what? Reassurance? Kindness? Some sign this wasn't a terrible mistake? He looked back at her, steady and unflinching. Then, so quietly that only she could hear, he said, It's okay. We'll figure it out. And somehow those words helped. I do, she whispered. And do you, Taza Nanton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation. His voice carried through the church like a vow carved in stone. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, I pronounce you husband and wife. The Reverend looked at them both, still clearly bewildered. I suppose you may kiss the bride. Taza leaned down. For a terrifying second, Mara thought he was actually going to kiss her, and she had no idea what to do about that. But he just pressed his lips to her forehead, brief and formal, and stepped back. Done, he said. And just like that, Mara Whitlock ceased to exist. She was Mara Nanton now, whatever that meant. The reception was chaos. Someone had already prepared food, Mrs. Patterson's promised cake, plus sandwiches and punch, and all the other things that had been arranged for Clara's wedding. It seemed wasteful to let it go uneaten, so people stayed, though the atmosphere was less celebration and more morbid curiosity. Mara sat in a corner, still holding Thomas, watching Taza speak with a small group of men. He was listening more than talking, his face giving away nothing. She wondered what they were saying to him, offering congratulations, expressing sympathy, warning him about the Whitlock family's terrible judgment. Well, Mara looked up. Mrs. Patterson stood over her, holding 2 cups of punch. She offered one to Mara. Thank you. That was quite a morning. The older woman settled into the chair beside her. How are you holding up? I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow." Mrs. Patterson laughed, a dry sound. "Fair enough. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. That baby needs stability, and you've been providing it since the day he was born. Clara, Mrs. Patterson said firmly, is a selfish child who never grew up. I've known your family a long time, Mara. Your mother was good people. Your father worked hard, but Clara," she shook her head, "some people are just born thinking the world owes them something. You're not like her." Mara didn't know what to say to that. She'd spent her whole life being compared to Clara. Why can't you be more outgoing like your sister? Why can't you smile more? Why can't you be prettier, more fun, more something? To hear someone say she was better specifically because she wasn't like Clara felt strange. "Mr. Nanton seems like a good man," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Quiet, but solid. He's done well with that ranch, and he clearly cares about the baby, or he wouldn't have gone through with any of this." "He doesn't know me." "He will. Marriage is long. You'll have plenty of time to get acquainted." She patted Mara's knee. "And between you and me, better to marry a good man you'll learn to love than a charming man who'll break your heart." Was Taza a good man? Mara had no idea. She knew he hadn't run when things got difficult. That counted for something. Across the room, Taza caught her eye. He said something to the men he was with, then walked over. People watched him cross the room. They were all still watching everything, storing up details to gossip about later. "We should go," he said when he reached her. "Now?" "It's a 2-hour ride to the ranch. Best to leave while the day's still young." He looked at Thomas. "He travel okay?" "I think so. I've never taken him on a horse." "He'll be fine. I brought the wagon." Of course he had. He'd come prepared for a wife and a baby. He'd just gotten a different wife than expected. Mara stood, her legs unsteady. Mrs. Patterson rose too, giving her a quick, surprising hug. "You take care of yourself, girl. And if you need anything, you send word, you hear?" "Thank you." There were other goodbyes, brief, awkward. Most people didn't know what to say to her. A few women offered quiet congratulations. Most just stared. Taza led her outside where a simple wagon waited. It wasn't fancy, just a flat bed with a bench seat pulled by 2 sturdy horses. Her trunk, when had someone fetched her trunk, was already loaded in the back. "I had your things brought over from the store," Taza said, seeing her look. "Henderson said you didn't have much." She didn't. 1 trunk, total. Everything she owned in the world. Taza helped her up onto the seat, his hands firm at her waist. Then he took Thomas, holding the baby with unexpected ease while Mara settled. He handed Thomas back and climbed up beside her. "You ever been out toward the mesa?" he asked, taking the reins. "No." "It's different from town. Quieter." Quiet sounded good. Mara was so tired of noise, of voices, of people looking at her and whispering. Taza clicked his tongue, and the horses started moving. Cedar Ridge began to fall away behind them. The church, the store, the small houses clustered along Main Street. Everything she'd ever known, shrinking into the distance. She held Thomas closer and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just married a complete stranger and was heading into the middle of nowhere with him. "You scared?" Taza asked after they'd been riding for maybe 20 minutes. "Yes." "Of me?" "I don't know you well enough to be scared of you yet." He made a sound that might have been a laugh. "That's honest." "You asked." "Most women would lie, say they're fine." "I'm not most women." "No," he agreed, glancing at her. "I don't think you are." They rode in silence after that. The landscape changed gradually. Fewer trees, more open space, red dirt and scrub grass and rock formations that looked like they'd been here since the beginning of time. The sky stretched huge and blue overhead, no clouds anywhere. Mara had never been comfortable with silence. Clara had filled every quiet moment with chatter, and Mara had learned to do the same, asking questions, making observations, anything to keep conversation flowing. But with Taza, the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt intentional, like he was thinking, processing, sorting through whatever had just happened. She should probably be doing the same, but her mind was blank, exhausted, refusing to work properly. Thomas fell asleep in her arms, his small body warm and trusting. She looked down at him, at his impossibly tiny fingers, his soft dark hair. He looked like Taza, would probably grow to look more like him. Would he remember Clara at all? Or would he grow up thinking Mara was his mother, never knowing that the woman who gave birth to him had cared so little that she'd run? Does he have a name? Taza asked suddenly. Mara blinked. Thomas. Clara named him Thomas. You call him that? Sometimes, mostly just baby. We can change it, if you want. Could you do that? Just change a baby's name? It seemed wrong, somehow. But then again, everything about this situation was wrong, so maybe wrong was the new normal. What would you call him? She asked. Taza was quiet for a moment. My father's name was Talon. It means rain bear in our language, but that might be too much for a boy to carry. I like it, Mara said, and she did. It sounded strong, significant. Better than Thomas, which was just a name Clara had picked because she'd once known a boy named Thomas who she thought was handsome. You sure? Yes. Then we'll call him Talon. Taza glanced at the sleeping baby. Hear that, son? You've got a new name. Talon. Their son had a new name, and she had a new name, and everything was new and terrifying and completely out of her control. Can I ask you something? Mara's voice came out smaller than she intended. Go ahead. Why did you do it? Why did you really marry me instead of just calling the whole thing off? Taza didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the reins. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Clara wanted things. The dress, the wedding, everyone watching. She wanted to feel special. He said it without judgment, just stating facts. But when it came to what mattered, taking care of Talon, building a life, she wasn't interested. I knew that before today. Mara's breath caught. You knew she was going to run? No, but I knew she wasn't happy. Knew she felt trapped. I hoped. He shrugged. Doesn't matter what I hoped. Then why go through with marrying anyone at all? Because Talon deserves better than being raised by someone who sees him as a mistake. And you... He looked at her directly now, something intense in his gaze. You showed up, when it would have been easier to hide. You stood there holding my son and told the truth, even though it hurt. That takes strength. Mara felt heat rise in her face. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You could have walked away, let someone else deal with it. But you didn't. She hadn't thought about it like that. It had just seemed like the obvious thing to do, the only thing to do. Someone had to face the disaster Clara had created, and Clara wasn't there, so it fell to Mara. Like everything always did, but maybe that was its own kind of choice. I won't pretend this is a love match, Taza continued. I'm not going to lie to you and say I married you because I've been secretly watching you and falling for you from afar. That's not what this is. I know. But I think we can make it work. You need a home, Talon needs a mother, and I need... He trailed off, then shook his head. I need help. Running the ranch, raising him. I need a partner. A partner. Not a wife in the traditional sense. A partner. What do you expect from me? Mara asked. In this partnership? Take care of Talon, help around the house. If you can read and write, I can. I kept the books at the store. Good. Then you can help with the ranch accounts too. I'm not good with numbers. He shifted the reins to one hand. In return, you'll have a roof, food, safety. I won't hurt you or force you to do anything you don't want to do. You'll be my wife in name and law, but what that means beyond that, he gestured vaguely. We'll figure it out as we go. It was the most he'd said it once since they'd met, and Mara found herself studying his profile. There was something almost vulnerable in the way he spoke about figuring things out, like he was just as uncertain as she was, even if he hid it better. Okay, she said, we'll figure it out. He nodded once, satisfied. They rode the rest of the way without speaking. The sun climbed higher and Mara's arms grew tired from holding Talon, but she didn't complain. This was her life now. Might as well get used to it. The ranch appeared gradually, first just a distant shape on the horizon, then resolving into a house, a barn, corrals, fencing. It was bigger than she'd expected, more established. The house was adobe, single story, with a covered porch running along the front. Not fancy, but solid, built to last. Taza pulled the wagon up to the house and set the brake. Home. he said simply. Home. Such a strange word. Mara had lived above the store her whole life. That had been home. This was just a building she'd never seen before, in a place so remote she couldn't see another structure in any direction. But Talon was stirring in her arms, waking up, and Taza was already climbing down, reaching up to help her, and there was no point in dwelling on what was or wasn't home. This was where she lived now. She'd just have to make the best of it. Taza lifted her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure, and for just a moment they stood very close, close enough that she could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. Then he stepped back, breaking the moment, and turned to unload her trunk. I'll show you inside, Mum, he said. Get you settled. Mara followed him up the porch steps, Talon heavy in her arms, her heart beating too fast. The door swung open to reveal a dim interior. She could make out a table, chairs, shelves. Taza stood aside, letting her enter first. Welcome home, Mara. She stepped across the threshold into her new life, leaving everything she'd ever known behind. And somewhere, probably very far away by now, Clara was running. But Mara wasn't running anymore. She was finally standing still. The house was darker inside than Mara expected, her eyes needing a moment to adjust from the harsh sunlight. The main room was larger than it looked from outside, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall and windows that let in strips of light across wooden floors that needed sweeping. A table sat in the center, surrounded by mismatched chairs. Shelves lined the walls, holding dishes, tools, books even. The air smelled like dust and old smoke and something else she couldn't quite place. Sage, maybe. Kitchen's through there, Taza gestured to a doorway on the left. 2 bedrooms down that hall. The bigger one's mine. The smaller one has a bed and a cradle. He said it matter-of-factly. No embarrassment, just stating arrangements. Separate bedrooms. Mara felt something unknot in her chest that she hadn't realized was tight. I'll bring your trunk to your room, he continued, already moving back toward the door. There's a well out back. Water's good. Privy's past the barn. Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the middle of this strange house with Talon starting to fuss in her arms. Mara walked slowly through the space, taking inventory. The furniture was rough but well made. Everything was functional, nothing decorative except for a woven blanket draped over the back of one chair. The pattern was Apache, she thought, geometric and precise. The dishes on the shelves were clean but few. Maybe 8 plates total. A handful of cups. This was a house built for necessity, not comfort. She found the smaller bedroom and nearly laughed. Smaller was generous. It was barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed pushed against one wall and a cradle that looked handmade wedged into the corner. But there was a window, at least, and when she looked out she could see the land stretching away toward distant mesas, red and gold in the afternoon light. Talon was crying in earnest now. Hungry again, probably. Mara sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was thin but adequate, and started to feed him from the bottle she'd prepared that morning. That morning. It felt like a year ago. Heavy footsteps in the hall, then Taza appeared in the doorway with her trunk balanced on one shoulder, like it weighed nothing. Where do you want this? Just set it anywhere. I'll unpack later. He lowered it to the floor, then straightened, looking at her feeding Talon. His expression was unreadable. You've been doing this the whole time, he said. It wasn't a question. Clara tried it first, but she didn't like it. Said it made her feel like cattle. Taza's jaw tightened, the first real emotion she'd seen break through. She said that about our son. She said a lot of things. He was quiet for a moment, watching Talon drink, then, I should have known better. I did know better. I just thought... He shook his head. Doesn't matter now. You thought maybe she'd change once the baby came. Something like that. Mara adjusted Talon in her arms, wiping milk from his chin. People don't really change. They just get better at hiding what they already are. Taza looked at her sharply, like she'd surprised him. That's dark. That's experience. A beat of silence, then he moved back toward the door. I've got work to do. Cattle need checking, fence needs mending. There's food in the kitchen, bread, some dried meat, eggs if the hens cooperated this morning. Make yourself something if you're hungry. What about you? I'll eat later. When? He paused. When I'm done working. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. but there was something almost amused in his voice. You don't have to worry about me, Mara. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. You have a wife now. That's supposed to change things. Is it? He leaned against the door frame, studying her. You've been married all of 2 hours and you're already telling me how it works? Someone has to. This time he definitely almost smiled. Fair enough. I'll be back before dark. Don't go wandering off. It's easy to get lost out here if you don't know the land. Then he was gone again, his boots echoing down the hall and out the front door. A minute later, she heard the wagon moving, heading out toward wherever the cattle were. Mara sat in the quiet house, alone except for Talon, and tried to figure out what she was supposed to do now. The answer came from the baby, who finished eating and immediately spit up all over both of them. Right. She had work to do too. The next few hours passed in a blur of basic survival. She found cloths to clean up Talon and herself, located a basin to wash the soiled fabric, discovered that the pump at the kitchen sink worked but was stiff from disuse, changed Talon's diaper using the last clean cloth from the small supply she'd brought, which meant she needed to wash more immediately. Went outside to find the well Taza had mentioned, which was thankfully close to the house, and hauled up bucket after bucket of cold, clear water. The privy was indeed past the barn, a good 100 yards from the house, which would be miserable in winter, but at least kept the smell distant. The barn itself was neat, organized, tools hung on walls and hay stacked in the loft. Several chickens scattered when she walked past, clucking indignantly. Back in the house, she hung the wet cloths on a line she found strung between 2 posts behind the kitchen. Then she put Talon down in the cradle. He was getting drowsy again, thank goodness, and went to investigate the kitchen properly. It was barely a kitchen at all. A stove, a sink, some shelves holding supplies. She found the bread Taza had mentioned, wrapped in cloth. It was homemade, dense, and dark, probably a few days old but not moldy. The dried meat was venison, tough as leather but edible. 3 eggs in a bowl, still specked with dirt and feathers. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since yesterday. The wedding breakfast she'd planned to have with Clara felt like something from another lifetime. Clara. Where was she now? Had she made it to the next town, further? Was she thinking about Talon at all, or had she already pushed him out of her mind the way she pushed out everything inconvenient? Mara slammed a pan onto the stove harder than necessary, making a satisfying clang. Thinking about Clara wouldn't help anything. Clara was gone. And good riddance. She fried the eggs in lard she found in a crock, tore off chunks of bread to toast on the stovetop. The eggs were fresh, the yolks bright orange. She ate standing at the counter, too hungry to bother with plates or sitting down. And it was the best meal she'd had in weeks. When Talon woke crying an hour later, she fed him again, changed him again, walked him around the house until he settled. The sun was lower now, painting the windows gold. Taza still wasn't back. Mara looked around the main room again, seeing it differently now, seeing what it could be instead of what it was. The floors needed sweeping badly. The windows were grimy with dust. The shelves were organized but sparse, like someone had bought exactly the minimum needed and nothing more. The whole place felt like a man had been living here alone, doing just enough to get by. She could change that. She found a broom in a corner, rough-hewn, handmade probably, and started sweeping. Dust rose in clouds, making her cough. How long since anyone had cleaned this place? Months, maybe. She swept it all toward the door, then outside, watching the wind catch it and carry it away. The windows next. She hauled more water, found rags, scrubbed at glass that hadn't been washed in who knew how long. Her arms ached. Her back hurt. But the windows cleared, letting in more light, and that felt like winning something small but important. Talon watched from his cradle, which she'd moved to the main room so she could keep an eye on him. He seemed content, occasionally waving his tiny fists at nothing. You like it here? She asked him. Think we can make this work? He blew a spit bubble at her. She chose to interpret that as yes. The sun was touching the horizon when she heard the wagon returning. She was in the kitchen, trying to figure out what she could possibly make for dinner from the limited supplies, when Taza's boots sounded on the porch. He came in and stopped, looking around. His gaze swept the swept floors, the clean windows, landed on her standing in the kitchen doorway. You've been busy. Place needed it. He set down the toolbox he was carrying, then walked slowly through the room, touching nothing but clearly seeing everything. When he reached the window, he ran his finger along the sill, checking for dust that was no longer there. "I meant to clean," he said quietly. "Just never seemed to have the time." "You have help now." He turned to look at her, backlit by the setting sun through the newly cleaned glass, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Not attraction, exactly. More like recognition. Like he was seeing her as a person for the first time, not just the solution to a problem. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. Simple. But they meant something. "You're welcome." She gestured toward the kitchen. "I was trying to figure out dinner. Options are limited." "There's more food in the cellar. I'll show you." He moved past her, opened a door she'd assumed was a closet. Stairs led down into darkness. "Careful, steps are steep." She followed him down into a surprisingly large space dug into the earth below the house. It was cool, almost cold, and lined with shelves holding preserved foods, jars of vegetables, dried beans, cornmeal, salt pork, even some canned peaches. "I stock up when I go to town," Taza explained. "Try to make trips only once a month if I can help it. This is more than I expected. Winter gets hard out here. Last year we got snowed in for 3 weeks straight. Can't run out of food when that happens." We. He'd said we, but last winter he'd been alone, hadn't he? Or had Clara been here already, pregnant and miserable? "The beans need soaking overnight," Mara said, focusing on the practical. "But I could make stew with the salt pork and some of these vegetables." "Sounds good to me. I'm not particular." They climbed back upstairs. Taza went to check on Talon, who was starting to fuss again, while Mara gathered supplies. She heard him talking to the baby, voice low and gentle, words she couldn't quite make out. When she glanced over, he had Talon against his shoulder, one large hand supporting the small head, and he was swaying slightly, the same rocking motion she used. He'd done this before, with Talon, she realized, while Clara was probably sleeping or complaining or finding excuses to be anywhere else. "You want to tell me about her?" Mara asked, starting to chop salt pork. "Clara, I mean, what happened between you two?" Taza was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, "Met her at the harvest dance last year. She came up to me, started talking. Most people in town don't talk to me much." "Because you're Apache." "Half Apache. My mother was white. But yeah, that's part of it." He adjusted Talon in his arms. Clara didn't seem to care about that. Or she pretended not to. Either way, it was nice. Feeling like someone wanted to know me. Mara added the pork to a pot, started dicing preserved carrots. "She's good at that, making people feel special." "She is. Was. I don't know." He sighed. "We started seeing each other. She'd ride out here sometimes, or I'd meet her in town. It was good for a while. Then she told me she was pregnant." "How'd she tell you?" "Cried. Said she was scared that people would judge her, that she didn't know what to do. So I said I'd marry her. Seemed like the right thing." The right thing. Mara poured water into the pot, set it on the stove. "Did you love her?" "I thought I might, or that I could learn to. She was bright, lit up a room, and I'd been alone a long time. Thought maybe it was time to build something more than just a ranch." "But she didn't want to build anything." "No." His voice went flat. "She wanted to be rescued. Wanted someone to take care of her, make all her problems go away. When she figured out that being a wife and mother meant work, meant sacrifice, meant putting someone else first," he trailed off. "She checked out. Stopped trying. Started talking about leaving." "And you let her?" "What was I supposed to do? Chain her to the house?" He shifted Talon to his other shoulder. "I told her if she wanted to go, she should go. But the baby stayed with me. I wasn't going to let her take my son and disappear." "So she left him behind." "Left both of us behind, though I think she planned to take him at first. That's why she kept stalling, changing her mind about when she'd leave. Couldn't figure out how to run away with a baby that needed constant care." Mara stirred the stew, anger bubbling up. "She's the worst kind of coward." "Yeah." Taza's voice was tired. "Yeah, she is." They were quiet after that, Taza walking Talon while Mara cooked. The stew came together slowly, filling the house with savory smells. She found plates, set them on the table along with what was left of the bread. It felt strange, domestic, setting a table for a husband she barely knew. When the food was ready, Taza put Talon down in the cradle. The baby had finally fallen asleep again, and they sat across from each other. The table was small enough that their knees almost touched underneath. Taza ate like he did everything else, efficiently, without comment. 3 bites in, though, he paused. "This is good. It's just stew. It's the first real meal I've had in this house in 6 months," and he took another bite. "Clara didn't cook, said she didn't know how." "She knew how. She just didn't want to." "You're not going to defend her at all, are you?" Mara met his eyes. "Would you want me to?" "No." He almost smiled. "No, I don't think I would." They finished eating in comfortable silence. When the plates were empty, Taza stood and started clearing the table before Mara could. "You cooked. I'll clean. You've been working all day. So have you." He was already carrying dishes to the kitchen. "We're partners, remember? That means sharing the work." Partners. Right. She kept forgetting that part. Mara went to check on Talon, who was still sleeping peacefully. His little face was so calm, so trusting. She touched his soft cheek with one finger, feeling the warmth of his skin. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I promise." Behind her, she heard water running, the clank of dishes being washed. This was her life now. This house. This man. This baby. No going back. No other options. But maybe that was okay. Maybe not having options was better than having too many and choosing wrong. The days fell into a rhythm. Taza woke before dawn and was usually gone by the time Mara got up with Talon. He'd work the ranch, mending fences, checking cattle, maintaining equipment, and come back around noon for a quick meal. Then more work until dinner. After dinner, he'd spend time with Talon, teaching Mara things about the ranch, or simply sitting in quiet while she sewed or cleaned or organized. They spoke more than Mara expected. Not constant conversation like Clara would have demanded, but real exchanges. Taza explained how the ranch worked, the rotation of pastures, the spring where the cattle watered, the markers that defined his property lines. Mara told him about keeping books, showed him her system of recording expenses and income. He was smart, she discovered, just not educated. He could read, but slowly. Numbers gave him trouble. But he remembered everything she told him, filing it away for later use. They learned each other's patterns. Taza liked his coffee strong enough to strip paint. Mara hated being touched before she'd fully woken up. Taza could go silent for hours when he was working something out in his head. Mara hummed when she was content, usually not even realizing she was doing it. Small things. Building blocks of knowing someone. 2 weeks in, Mara woke to the sound of hammering. She found Taza outside her window, building something. "What are you doing?" He didn't stop working. "Making you shelves. You said yesterday you needed somewhere to put Talon's things." She had said that, mentioned it in passing while folding the tiny clothes she'd sewn from fabric scraps. She hadn't expected him to remember, let alone act on it. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." He fit 2 boards together, checking the angle. "You've been making this place a home. Least I can do is help." The shelves were finished by afternoon, installed in her small room with enough space for clothes, blankets, the growing collection of things a baby needed. They weren't fancy, but they were sturdy and well made, the wood sanded smooth so there were no splinters. "Thank you," Mara said, running her hand along the edge. "You keep saying that. You keep doing things worth thanking you for." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "You make it sound like basic decency is rare. In my experience, it is." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded like she'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "I'm going to try to be better than your experience." And he left before she could figure out how to respond to that. 3 weeks in, Talon smiled for the first time. Mara was feeding him, making faces like she always did, when his whole face lit up in a gummy grin that made her heart stop. "Taza!" She didn't even think, just called for him. "Taza, come here." He appeared in the doorway, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Look." She made another face at Talon, and the baby smiled again, bigger this time. Taza's entire demeanor changed. He crossed the room in 3 strides, crouched beside them, staring at his son with an expression of pure wonder. "Do it again," he said. Mara made another silly face. Talon smiled, then kicked his legs happily, clearly enjoying the attention. "He's happy," Taza said, voice rough. "He's actually happy." "Of course he's happy. He's fed, warm, safe." "No." Taza shook his head. "When Clara had him, he cried all the time. Constant. I thought maybe something was wrong with him, that he was sick or in pain, but he was just miserable because she was miserable. And now—" He touched Talon's tiny hand, and the baby grabbed his finger. "Now he smiles." Mara felt something crack open in her chest. Babies know when they're loved. "Yeah." Taza looked up at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "They do." That night, after dinner, Taza didn't go straight to his room like usual. Instead, he sat at the table while Mara washed dishes, clearly working up to something. "What?" she finally asked. "I need to go to town tomorrow, stock up on supplies before winter starts settling in." He paused. "I want you to come with me." Mara's hands stilled in the water. She hadn't been back to town since the wedding. Hadn't even thought about it. The idea of facing all those people, all those stares and whispers. I don't know if that's a good idea. They're going to talk no matter what. Might as well show them you're not hiding. "I'm not hiding. I'm just hiding," he said firmly. "And I get it. What happened was humiliating. But you didn't do anything wrong, Mara. Clara did. You're just living with the consequences of her choices, same as me." "Easy for you to say. You didn't grow up there. They're not your neighbors, My what? Friends?" He raised an eyebrow. "Those people were never your friends. If they were, they wouldn't have blamed you for what Clara did." He was right. She knew he was right. But knowing didn't make the idea of walking down Main Street any easier. "Besides," Taza continued, "you need to be known as my wife, officially. Not just the woman who filled in when the real bride ran off. I am the real bride. We're legally married. Then act like it. Come to town with me. Let people see us together." He stood, moved closer. "I'm not asking you to hold my hand or pretend we're madly in love. Just be present, that's all." Mara dried her hands on a cloth, thinking. He was right about needing to establish her place, right about the gossip only getting worse if she hid. But the thought of facing Mrs. Patterson, the Reverend, all the people who'd watched her marry a stranger. What if they're cruel? "Then we leave. Simple as that." His voice was steady, certain. "But I won't let anyone disrespect you. You're a Nantan now. That means something." Did it? She barely felt like a Whitlock anymore, let alone a Nantan. But maybe that was the point. Maybe it was time to figure out who Mara Nantan was. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll go." "Good." He headed toward his room, then paused. "Wear something nice if you have it. Not for them. For you. So you feel strong." After he disappeared down the hall, Mara went to her trunk. At the very bottom, wrapped in paper, was a dress she'd made 2 years ago. Dark green, simple, but well-fitted, with small buttons down the front. She'd made it for herself, planning to wear it to church. But Clara had borrowed it and spilled wine on it and ruined the skirt. Mara had cut the stain away and hemmed it shorter, but she'd never worn it after that. It felt tainted. Now she held it up, examining it in the lamplight. It was actually prettier this way, she thought, less fussy, more practical. She'd wear it tomorrow, not for the town, for herself. Like Taza said. The ride into town took 2 hours, same as before, but it felt longer with Mara's nerves stretched tight. She held Talon in her lap, dressed in a clean outfit she'd sewn from soft cotton. Taza wore his good shirt, his hair tied back neatly. They looked like what they were, a family going to town for supplies. Except they weren't really a family. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Mara still slept in the small room, and Taza in his. They ate together, worked together, cared for Talon together. But there was a distance between them still, a careful boundary neither crossed. "You're thinking too loud," Taza said, breaking the silence. "How can thinking be loud?" "You get this look, like you're arguing with someone in your head." "Maybe I am. Who's winning?" Despite herself, Mara smiled. Haven't decided yet. They reached town just before noon. Main Street looked exactly the same. Same buildings, same dust, same people going about their business. But when Taza pulled the wagon to a stop outside the general store, heads turned. Conversation paused, then started again, faster. Ignore them, Taza said quietly. He climbed down, came around to help Mara. His hands were steady on her waist as he lifted her down, and he kept one hand at the small of her back as they walked toward the store. The touch was small, probably meant to be reassuring, but it sent electricity through her spine. She forced herself to breathe normally. Mr. Henderson looked up as they entered, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Nantan, Mrs. Nantan. Mrs. Nantan. The name still sounded foreign. Need to stock up for winter, Taza said. I've got a list. Of course. Henderson took the paper Taza offered, scanning it. This'll take me a bit to put together. You folks want to come back in an hour? We'll wait. They ended up at the small cafe across the street, the only place in town to get a hot meal besides the saloon. Mara hadn't been inside in months. It was expensive, and Clara had always said it was beneath them. But Taza held the door open, and Mara walked in with Talon in her arms and her head held high. Every person in the cafe turned to look. Mara felt their stares like physical weight, judging, measuring, finding her wanting. She almost turned around, almost ran. Then Taza's hand was on her back again, gentle but firm, guiding her to a table by the window. Coffee? He asked, as casual as if they ate here every week. Please. The waitress, a girl maybe 16, new since Mara last came here, approached nervously. What can I get you? 2 coffees, whatever the lunch special is, twice. Taza didn't even look at the menu. Yes, sir. The girl scurried away. Across the room, Mara heard whispers. She caught fragments. Nerve! Showing her face. That poor baby. Heard she knew the whole time. Her hands trembled. She set Talon down in her lap, focusing on him instead of the voices. Look at me, Taza said quietly. She did. His dark eyes were steady, calm. They don't matter. The only people at this table are you, me, and Talon. Everyone else is just noise. Easy to say when they're not talking about you. They talk about me plenty, have since I was born, half-breed, savage, squatter on land that should belong to white men. He sipped his coffee, unbothered. I stopped caring what they thought a long time ago. You should too. I'm not like you. No, he agreed. You're stronger. You just don't know it yet. The food came, beef stew, bread, more coffee. It was good, better than Mara expected. They ate quietly, Taza occasionally making faces at Talon to keep the baby entertained. Halfway through the meal, the cafe door opened and Mrs. Patterson walked in. Mara's stomach dropped. The older woman spotted them immediately. For a long moment, she just stood there, her expression unreadable. Then she walked straight to their table. Mr. Nantan, Mara. She nodded to each of them. Mrs. Patterson, Taza said evenly. I heard you were in town. Wanted to say hello. She looked at Talon and her face softened. My goodness, he's grown. May I? Mara hesitated, then held the baby up. Mrs. Patterson took him with practiced ease, bouncing him gently. He looks healthy, happy. He is, Mara said. That's good. That's very good. Mrs. Patterson looked at her directly. I've been meaning to ride out to your place, check on you, make sure you're settling in all right. You don't need to do that. Maybe not. But I'd like to anyway. She handed Talon back. You're doing a good thing raising this boy. Don't let anyone tell you different. Then she was gone, moving to her own table, leaving Mara staring after her in confusion. What just happened? Mara asked. Approval, Taza said. Mrs. Patterson runs half this town. If she says you're doing right, others will follow. Just like that? Just like that. He finished his stew. People are sheep, Mara. They follow whoever seems most certain, and that woman is nothing if not certain. The rest of the meal passed without incident. They collected their supplies from Henderson, loaded the wagon, and headed home. As they left town, Mara looked back once. seeing Main Street fade into distance. It hadn't been as terrible as she feared. Not easy, but survivable. Maybe that was enough. "You did good," Taza said as they rode. "I didn't do anything. You showed up. That's doing something." The sun was setting by the time they got home, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed impossible. Taza unloaded supplies while Mara fed Talon and started dinner. The routine was familiar now, comfortable. After dinner, Taza pulled out the ranch ledger. "Show me again how you organize the expenses." They spent an hour going over numbers, Mara explaining her system while Taza listened with complete focus. He was better with figures than he thought, she realized. He just needed someone to explain them in a way that made sense. "You're good at this," she said as he correctly calculated the feed costs for the month. "I have a good teacher." Their eyes met across the table and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or just the simple acknowledgement that this was working, this strange arrangement, this marriage of necessity. Against all odds, it was actually working. Later, after Talon was asleep and Taza had gone to bed, Mara stood at her window looking out at the dark land. Somewhere out there, Clara was living her life. Free, unburdened. And Mara was here, tied to a ranch, and a man and a baby that weren't hers by blood. But for the first time since the wedding, she didn't feel trapped. She felt like maybe, possibly, she was exactly where she needed to be. Winter came early that year, arriving in October with frost that killed the last of the garden vegetables and winds that cut through clothing like they had intent. Mara spent her days preparing, preserving what food she could, sewing warmer clothes for Talon, checking and rechecking their supplies against Taza's estimates of what they'd need. "You're worrying again," Taza said one morning, finding her in the cellar counting jars for the third time. "I want to make sure we have enough. We have plenty. More than enough." He climbed down the stairs, took the jar from her hands. "Mara, look at me." She did. His face was serious but not unkind. "We're not going to starve. We're not going to freeze. I've been through 7 winters out here, and this is the best stocked I've ever been." He set the jar back on the shelf. "You've done good work. Stop second-guessing yourself." "I just don't want to mess this up." "Mess what up? You've turned this place into an actual home. Talon's thriving. The books are organized better than they've ever been. What exactly do you think you're messing up?" She didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, she did, but it was too complicated to explain. The constant fear that this was temporary, that she'd wake up one day and find out it was all a mistake, that she didn't actually belong here. "Come on," Taza said, taking her hand. "There's something I want to show you." He led her outside and around the house to the east side where she rarely went. There, built against the wall and covered with a tarp, was something large and rectangular. Taza pulled the tarp back, revealing a wooden frame with glass panels. A greenhouse. "I've been working on it in the evenings," he explained. "Thought you might want to grow things year-round. Herbs, maybe some vegetables. My mother used to do this, said it kept her sane during the long winters." Mara stared at the structure. It wasn't finished. The glass needed securing, the door still needed to be hung, but it was real. Solid, built for her. "When did you have time to do this?" "I make time." He ran his hand along the frame, checking the joints. "Should be done in another week or so. Then you can start planting before the hard freeze sets in." Her throat felt tight. "You didn't have to—" "Stop saying that." He turned to face her, and there was something intense in his expression. "You keep acting like basic kindness is some extraordinary thing. It's not. You're my wife. This is your home. Why wouldn't I build you something to make it better?" "Because most men wouldn't." "Then most men are idiots." He said it so flatly that she almost laughed. "Look, I'm not trying to win your affection or trick you into something. I just figure if we're going to be stuck together, might as well make it tolerable." "Is that what this is? Tolerable?" He was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "I think it's better than tolerable. Don't you?" She did. That was the terrifying part. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, this arrangement had shifted from survival to something else. Something that felt dangerously close to comfortable. "Yeah," she admitted quietly. "I do." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good. Now get back inside before you freeze. I need to check the north fence before the weather turns." He left before she could respond. striding toward the barn with that long, easy gait she'd come to recognize. Mara stood in front of the greenhouse for a long moment, touching the smooth wood, imagining it full of green growing things in the dead of winter. Then Talon started crying inside, and she hurried back to the practical reality of a baby who needed changing. The sickness started with the older cattle. Taza noticed it first, 2 cows moving slowly, not grazing properly. By the next day, 4 more showed the same signs: listless, not eating, standing apart from the herd. "What's wrong with them?" Mara asked, standing at the fence while Taza examined one of the sick animals. "Don't know yet. Could be blackleg. Could be something they ate." He checked the cow's eyes, felt along her neck. "But it's spreading." "How bad?" "If it's blackleg and I don't stop it, I could lose half the herd." His voice was calm, but she could hear the tension underneath. "That's a year's income gone." Over the next 3 days, Taza barely slept. He separated the sick cattle, tried different remedies, consulted a veterinary guide that had belonged to his father. Nothing worked. More animals got sick. The ones who were sick first started dying. Mara watched him push himself to exhaustion, and it scared her more than the dying cattle. He'd come in after dark, eat whatever she'd kept warm for him, then go right back out. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements increasingly jerky. "You need to rest," she said on the 4th night, physically blocking his path to the door. "I need to save my herd." "You're not going to save anything if you collapse." She crossed her arms. "Sit down, eat, sleep for at least 4 hours. Then you can go back out." "Mara, I'm not asking." Her voice was sharper than she intended. "You told me we're partners. Partners don't let each other work themselves to death." He looked like he might argue. Then his shoulders sagged and he sank into a chair at the table. "I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything." "Tell me the symptoms again. All of them." "Why? You're not a veterinarian." "No, but I can read and think, same as you. Maybe a fresh perspective helps." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Lethargy, loss of appetite, swelling in the throat and chest, difficulty breathing, high fever, death within 3 to 5 days of first symptoms." Mara thought back to the medical books she'd read when their mother was sick. Different subject, same principles maybe. What about their water source? What about it? Where do they drink? The spring, mostly. There's a creek on the south end, but this time of year it's mostly dry. And the sick ones, are they all from the same part of the range? Taza frowned. Now that you mention it, yeah, they're mostly from the south pasture. So they're all drinking from the creek. But the creek's almost empty. There's barely any water. He stopped, eyes widening. Stagnant water, bacteria. Could that cause this? It could, if there's something dead upstream, contaminating what little water is left. He stood abruptly. "I need to check the creek. Now." "It's pitch dark out there." "I'll bring a lantern." "Then I'm coming with you." "Mara, you don't need to." "Stop telling me what I don't need to do." She was already moving toward her coat. "Talon's asleep. We won't be gone long. And if you're right about this, you're going to need help." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded. "All right, let's go." They saddled 2 horses, faster than the wagon, and rode south with lanterns casting weak circles of light in the darkness. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp, promising worse weather to come. Mara's fingers were numb within minutes despite her gloves. The creek was indeed nearly dry, just a thin trickle of water winding between rocks. Taza dismounted and started walking upstream, holding his lantern high. Mara followed, leading both horses. They found it a quarter-mile up, a dead deer, half submerged, bloated and rotting. The smell was overwhelming even in the cold air. "There," Taza said grimly. "That's what's killing them." "How long has it been here?" "Week, maybe more." He handed Mara his lantern and waded into the creek, grabbing the carcass by the legs. The deer was heavy, waterlogged, and he had to drag it out in stages. "What do we do now?" Mara asked. "Burn it. Then I need to divert the cattle away from this water source completely." He was breathing hard from the effort. "And pray the ones who are sick can recover now that they're not being constantly re-exposed." They burned the deer right there, the flames seeming small and inadequate against the vast darkness. But Taza watched it burn completely, making sure nothing remained that could contaminate the water. Will this work? Mara asked. I don't know. Maybe. If I caught it in time. He stared at the dying fire. I should have checked the water first. That's basic. I just didn't think you were focused on the symptoms, trying to treat the disease instead of finding the source. That's no excuse. It's a reason. There's a difference. She moved closer, drawn by the fire's warmth. You can't think of everything all the time, Taza. You're not perfect. I need to be. But this ranch is all I have, all we have. If I lose it, you're not going to lose it. She said it with more confidence than she felt. We found the problem. Now we fix it. He looked at her, the firelight playing across his face, making his features seem sharper, almost otherworldly. When did you get so certain about things? When I married you, I guess. The words came out before she could stop them, surprising them both. The wind gusted, sending sparks flying. Taza caught her elbow, steadying her, and for a moment they stood very close, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him despite the cold. We should get back, he said, his voice rough. Check on Talon. They rode home in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Charged, somehow. Full of things neither of them was ready to say. Over the next week, the sickness stopped spreading. The cattle who were already sick either recovered or died. They lost 12 total, a painful number but not catastrophic. Taza moved the herd to different pastures, set up new water stations, worked himself ragged making sure it didn't happen again. And Mara watched the sky, noting the way the clouds gathered thick and dark to the west. Storm coming. A big one, judging by the pressure in the air. She mentioned it to Taza over dinner. I know, he said. Been watching it too. Should hit tomorrow, maybe the day after. How bad? Bad enough. We might lose power if the wind gets too strong. He ate another bite of the venison stew she'd made. I'll bring extra wood up to the house, make sure the animals are secure. We'll be fine. The storm arrived the next evening with a violence that shocked Mara even though she'd been expecting it. The wind hit first, battering the house so hard the walls shook. Then came rain, not falling so much as being thrown sideways, hammering against the windows like it was trying to get in. Taza had been right about the power. The lamps flickered and died within the first hour, leaving them dependent on candles and the fireplace. He'd brought in enough wood to last days, stacked it neatly by the hearth. This is normal? Mara asked, holding Talon close. The baby was fussy, disturbed by the noise. For out here, yeah. Desert storms are different. They come hard and fast. Lightning flashed, illuminating the room for a brief second. Could last a few hours or a few days. No way to tell. The temperature dropped fast. Even with the fire roaring, the house grew cold. Mara added blankets to Talon's cradle, tucked him in carefully. He finally settled, exhausted from crying. Outside, something crashed. Metal on metal, loud even over the storm. Taza swore and headed for the door. Where are you going? That was the barn door. If it tears off, the whole structure could collapse. I need to secure it. You can't go out in this. I have to. He was already pulling on his heavy coat. Stay inside, keep the fire going. Then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. Mara stood at the window, trying to see him, but the rain was too thick. Just darkness and water and wind. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Mara paced, her anxiety building. What if something fell on him? What if he was hurt? She'd never forgive herself for letting him go out there alone. When the door finally banged open, she nearly cried with relief. Taza stumbled in, soaked through, bleeding from a cut over his left eye. You're hurt. I'm fine. Barn door caught me when it swung. He shrugged off his coat, dripping water everywhere. It's secure now. Sit down. Let me look at that. Mara, sit. She was already getting clean cloths, warm water from the kettle she'd kept on the fire. You can argue or you can let me help. Choose. He sat, watching her warily as she approached. The cut wasn't deep, but it was bleeding freely, running down the side of his face in a thin red line. Mara dabbed at it gently, cleaning away the blood. He winced, but didn't pull away. This close, she could see details she'd never noticed before. A small scar on his jaw. The exact pattern of black and amber in his eyes. The way his breath came a little too fast, whether from exertion or something else she couldn't tell. "You scared me," she said quietly. "I was gone 20 minutes." "I know, but I didn't know if you were okay." She pressed the cloth against the cut, applying pressure. "I didn't know if you'd come back." "I always come back." "Everyone says that. My father said that every time he went out, and then one day he didn't." Taza's hand came up, covering hers where it pressed against his forehead. "I'm not your father, and I'm not leaving you alone out here." The storm raged outside, shaking the house, but inside this small circle of firelight, everything felt still. Mara was intensely aware of his hand on hers, the warmth of his skin, the way he was looking at her like he was seeing something new. "The cut stopped bleeding," she managed. "Then you can let go." "I know." But neither of them moved. Thunder cracked, so loud it rattled the dishes. Talon whimpered in his sleep but didn't wake. The moment broke, and Mara stepped back, her hands shaking slightly as she set the bloody cloth aside. "You should change," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Your clothes are soaked." "Yeah." But he didn't move immediately. "Mara, I'll make coffee, help warm you up." She escaped to the kitchen, her heart hammering. What was happening? What had that been? Just proximity, probably. Just the stress of the storm and her worry about him. Nothing more. Except it felt like more. Taza emerged a few minutes later in dry clothes, his hair loose and dripping. He'd washed the blood off his face, leaving just a small cut visible at his hairline. He looked different with his hair down, younger somehow, less guarded. Mara handed him coffee, and he wrapped both hands around the cup, absorbing the warmth. "Thank you," he said, "for patching me up." "You're welcome." They sat at the table, the storm still howling outside. Neither seemed to know what to say. The easy rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks felt disrupted, replaced by something uncertain and charged. "Can I ask you something?" Mara finally said. "Always. Why did you really choose me? That day at the church?" She met his eyes. "You said I showed up and told the truth, but that's not enough reason to marry someone." Taza was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee. When he spoke, his voice was low. "I knew before the wedding." "Knew what?" "That Clara was planning to run. I didn't know when, didn't know she'd take the money. But I knew she was looking for an out." He set the cup down. 2 days before the wedding, I saw you in town. You were at the store, dealing with some man who was yelling about a bill. Clara was there too, watching, doing nothing, and you just handled it. Calm, firm, got the situation resolved without it turning into a fight. Mara remembered that. Mr. Peterson, drunk and angry about charges he swore he didn't owe. She'd had to get the ledger and show him each entry, talking him down until he finally left. "I watched you," Taza continued, "and I thought, that's someone who doesn't run from hard things. That's someone who stays." He looked at her directly. "When Clara didn't show up at the church, part of me was relieved, because it meant I had a chance to ask you instead." Her breath caught. "You planned it? The whole thing?" "No, I didn't plan anything. I just saw an opportunity and took it." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I know that sounds calculated. Maybe it was. But I needed a mother for Talon, and I needed someone who wouldn't bail when things got tough. You'd already proven you were that person. You didn't know me. I knew enough, and everything since has just confirmed it." His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers, but close. "You're stronger than you think you are, Mara. Stronger than Clara ever was. Stronger than most people I've met. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding things together most days. That's what strength is. Not having it all figured out, just refusing to quit." He did touch her hand then, just his fingers against hers. "You could have said no at the church. Could have walked away, let someone else deal with the mess. But you didn't. You stood there with my son in your arms, and you married a stranger because it was the right thing to do. Or because I was scared and had nowhere else to go. Maybe. But you're still here, still working, still caring for Talon, still fixing my mistakes." He gestured toward the window. "You spotted that the water was the problem when I was too close to see it. You saved the ranch, Mara. Not me. You." The weight of what he was saying pressed against her chest. She'd been thinking of herself as just filling a role, doing what needed to be done. But he saw it differently. He saw her as essential. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything." But his fingers tightened slightly on hers. "I just wanted you to know. You're not here by default or because I had no other choice. You're here because I chose you. And given the chance to do it over, I'd choose you again." Lightning flashed, throwing sharp shadows across his face. In that brief illumination, Mara saw something in his expression that made her pulse race. Not just gratitude or respect. Something deeper. Something that mirrored the confusing knot of feelings in her own chest. "Taza, Thunder drowned out whatever she was going to say. The house shook, and somewhere outside there was a tremendous crash. Then another sound, rhythmic, urgent, banging on the door. They both jumped up. Taza grabbed the rifle from above the mantel. When had he put that there? And approached the door cautiously. "Who's there?" "Help!" A man's voice, barely audible over the storm. "Please, I need help." Taza glanced at Mara, who nodded. He opened the door. A man stumbled in, soaked and shivering, maybe 30 years old with a face Mara didn't recognize. He was leading a horse, equally bedraggled. "Thank God," the man gasped. "My wagon overturned about 2 miles back. Horse broke loose. I've been walking for over an hour." "Get inside," Taza said immediately, pulling the horse in too. There wasn't room, but better cramped than dead. "Mara, get him something warm to drink." She hurried to pour more coffee, while Taza helped the man out of his wet coat and settled him by the fire. The horse stood nervously in the corner, dripping and trembling. "I'm James Miller," the man said, teeth chattering. "I was trying to make it to Painted Rock before the storm hit. Stupid, I know." "Very stupid," Taza agreed. "But you're alive, so we'll call it a learning experience? You hurt anywhere?" "Don't think so. Just cold." Mara brought the coffee and a blanket. Miller wrapped himself in it gratefully. "Thank you, both of you. I thought I was going to die out there." "Storm should break by morning," Taza said. "You can stay here tonight. I'll help you find your wagon when it's light." They spent the rest of the night in an odd sort of vigil. Miller dozed by the fire. The horse calmed eventually, standing with its head low. Taza sat in his chair, rifle across his lap. He didn't say why, but Mara understood. They didn't know this man. Better to be cautious. Mara tried to sleep in her room, but couldn't. Too much adrenaline, too many thoughts churning. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up and went back to the main room. Taza looked up as she entered. "Can't sleep either?" "No." She sat in the chair across from him. Miller was snoring softly, dead to the world. "Quite a night." "Yeah." He glanced at the stranger. "Reminded me why I built out here in the first place. Town's full of people who make bad decisions." "We all make bad decisions sometimes." "True, but some are worse than others." He set the rifle aside, leaning back. "You ever regret it? Marrying me?" The question caught her off guard. "Do you regret it?" I asked first. Mara thought about it honestly. The fear, the uncertainty, the constant feeling of being off balance, but also the greenhouse, the clean windows, Talon's smile, the way Taza listened when she talked about the books. The nights like this one, sitting together while the storm raged. "No," she said finally, "I don't regret it. Even though I'm difficult and stubborn and half the town probably thinks you married beneath you? You're not difficult, you're particular. And stubborn isn't always bad, and I don't care what the town thinks." She met his eyes. "Do you regret it?" "Not even a little bit." He said it without hesitation. "Best decision I've made in years." Something warm bloomed in her chest. She wanted to say more, to ask what he meant exactly, to understand the look in his eyes when he said it. But the moment felt fragile, like pushing too hard would shatter it. So she just smiled, and he smiled back, and they sat together in the firelight until dawn broke gray and wet through the windows. The storm passed. Miller retrieved his wagon with Taza's help, thanked them profusely, and left. The ranch returned to its normal rhythm. But something had shifted. Taza touched her more now, small things. His hand on her back as he passed, his fingers brushing hers when he handed her something. He lingered at dinner, asking about her day, telling her stories about his childhood. He finished the greenhouse and watched with obvious pleasure as she planted the first seeds. And Mara found herself watching him back, noticing the way he moved, economical and sure, the rare smile that transformed his whole face, the gentleness with which he held Talon, singing to him in Apache, words she didn't understand but that sounded like safety. They were building something, she realized, not just a partnership or an arrangement, something real. And that terrified her more than any storm ever could. The first real snow came in late November, blanketing the ranch in white that made everything look clean and new. Mara stood at the kitchen window, watching Taza check the cattle in the near pasture, his dark figure stark against all that brightness. Talon was on her hip, grabbing at her hair and babbling sounds that were starting to resemble actual words. Da-da-da, he said, and Mara's heart squeezed. That's right. That's your daddy out there. She'd stopped correcting herself weeks ago, stopped thinking of Taza as just the man she'd married out of necessity. He was Talon's father and her husband, and somewhere along the way those had become facts she didn't question anymore. The bigger question, the one that kept her up at night, was what exactly she felt about the man himself. She was watching him come back to the house, stomping snow off his boots on the porch, when she heard the wagon. Unusual. They weren't expecting anyone, and people didn't just drop by when you lived this far out. Taza heard it too. He came inside quickly, moving to the window beside her. You know who that is? He asked. No, can't see yet. They waited, Taza's hand resting on the small of her back in a gesture that had become automatic. The wagon came into view, pulled by a single tired-looking horse. The driver was bundled against the cold, face hidden by a scarf and hat. Then the person climbed down, and the scarf fell away. Clara. Mara felt the floor tilt under her feet. Beside her, Taza went absolutely rigid. No, Mara breathed. No, she can't be here. But she was. Clara, thinner than before, her face drawn and pale, her fancy traveling dress dirty and torn at the hem. She looked up at the house, and even from this distance Mara could see the desperation in her sister's eyes. Stay here, Taza said, his voice flat and hard. I'll handle this. She's my sister, and my ex-fiancé who abandoned our son. I'll handle it. He was already moving toward the door, and there was something dangerous in the set of his shoulders. Mara followed anyway, still holding Talon. She wasn't hiding, not from this. Taza stepped out onto the porch just as Clara reached the steps. She stopped, looking up at him, and her expression crumbled. Taza, thank God. I didn't know where else to go. You need to leave. His voice could have cut glass. Right now. Please, just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your choice. Live with it. Clara's eyes shifted past him, landing on Mara in the doorway. Her whole face changed, cycling through shock, hurt, and then something ugly. You, she said, her voice shaking. You took my place. You took everything. I didn't take anything, Mara said, surprised by how steady her own voice was. You threw it away. I was scared. I made a mistake. Clara started up the steps, but Taza blocked her path. Please, I just need help. I don't have anywhere to go, no money, nothing. Should have thought of that before you stole $340 and ran off. Clara flinched. I know I messed up, but I'm back now. We can fix this. I can be better. I can... Her eyes went to Talon, and she reached out. Let me see my baby. Mara stepped back instinctively, holding Talon closer. The baby looked at Clara with no recognition, just mild curiosity at a stranger's face. He's not your baby anymore, Taza said. You gave up that right when you left him. You can't just steal my child. I didn't steal him. You abandoned him. His voice was getting louder now, anger breaking through. You left him with a woman you knew would take care of him, and you ran. That was your choice, Clara. Own it. I want my son back. Clara's voice turned shrill. You can't keep him from me. I'm his mother. Mara's his mother, Taza said, and the words hit Mara like a physical blow. She's the one who feeds him every night, walks him when he cries, changes his diapers, and sews his clothes. She's the one who loves him, What have you done except give birth? Claire's face twisted. This is your fault, Mara. You always wanted what I had. You were always jealous. I was never jealous of you. And that was the truth, Mara realized. She'd envied Clara's ease with people, maybe, her confidence. But jealous? No. I felt sorry for you because you had everything and you couldn't see it. Sorry for me? Clara laughed, a harsh sound. You're married to a half-breed rancher in the middle of nowhere raising my bastard, and you feel sorry for me? Taza moved so fast Mara barely saw it. 1 second he was on the porch, the next he was down the steps, backing Clara away from the house with just his presence. You need to leave, he said, voice deadly quiet. Before I do something we'll both regret. I have nowhere to go. Clara was crying now, mascara running down her face. The man I ran off with, he left me in Santa Fe. Took the money, took everything. I've been trying to get back here for weeks. That's not my problem. Taza, please. She grabbed his arm and he shook her off like she was nothing. I'll do better this time, I promise. Just give me another chance. No. But I'm the one you were supposed to marry. She's just the backup, the second choice. Something in Mara snapped. She handed Talon to Taza and walked down the steps until she was face to face with her sister. You're right, she said calmly. I was the second choice. But I showed up, I stayed, I did the work, and I earned my place here. She looked Clara dead in the eye. You want to know what I've built while you were gone? I've made this house a home. I've learned to run a ranch. I've raised your son into a happy, healthy baby who smiles every day. I've become someone's partner, someone's wife, someone's mother. What have you done? Clara's hand cracked across her face so fast Mara didn't have time to dodge. Her cheek exploded with pain, her eyes watering. Then Taza was there, putting himself between them, and his voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. Get off my land, now, or I swear I will tie you to that wagon and drag you to town myself. You wouldn't dare. Try me. They stared at each other, and something in Clara finally broke. Her shoulders sagged, tears flowing freely now. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered. Please, I'm begging you. Mara touched Taza's arm, felt the tension vibrating through him. Give us a minute, she said quietly. Mara, just a minute, please. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded stiffly and stepped back, though he didn't go far. Just far enough to give them the illusion of privacy. Mara faced her sister, this woman she'd lived with, protected, cleaned up after for 22 years. Clara looked small now, diminished. All her sparkle gone, leaving just the scared, selfish girl underneath. Why did you come back? Mara asked. I told you, I have nothing. No, really. Why here? You could have gone anywhere, begged help from anyone. Why come back to the people you hurt most? Clara was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ground. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. Because I knew you'd forgive me. You always do. And that was the truth, wasn't it? Clara had spent her whole life knowing that no matter what she did, Mara would be there to fix it, to smooth things over, to take the blame. You're right, Mara said softly. I always did, but I'm not that person anymore. What does that mean? It means I'm done being your safety net. I'm done sacrificing myself so you can keep being careless. She gestured toward the house. I have a family now. A real one. People who depend on me, who I depend on. And I'm not going to let you destroy that. So that's it. You're just going to throw me out to freeze? No, I'm going to give you a choice. Mara pulled off her wedding ring, the simple gold band Taza had given her at the ceremony, and pressed it into Clara's palm. This is worth maybe $20, enough to get you to the next town, pay for a room and some meals while you figure out what you're going to do with your life. Clara stared at the ring. But this is yours. And I'm giving it to you. One last time. I'm helping you. But it's the last time, Clara. After this, we're done. You don't come back here. You don't contact us. You leave Talon alone. She felt her throat tighten, but pushed through. You leave my family alone. He's my son. No, he's my son. You gave birth to him, but I'm his mother. And if you actually love him at all, you'll let him have the stable life I can give him instead of dragging him into whatever disaster you create next. Clara's face crumpled. For a moment, Mara thought she might refuse, might start screaming, might try to fight. But then her fingers closed around the ring, and she nodded. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. I really am." "I know." And surprisingly, Mara believed her. Clara was sorry. She just wasn't sorry enough to change. "Goodbye, Clara." She turned and walked back to the porch, to where Taza stood holding Talon. She didn't look back as Clara climbed into the wagon, didn't watch as she drove away. She just stood there, Taza's arm coming around her shoulders, and let herself shake. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "No, but I will be." They stood like that until the wagon disappeared from view, swallowed by the white landscape. Then Mara finally let herself cry. Not for Clara, but for the girl she used to be, the one who would have done anything to keep the peace. That girl was gone now. And honestly, Mara didn't miss her. Inside, the house was warm and smelled like the bread she'd been baking earlier. Taza settled Talon in his cradle and came to where Mara sat at the table, her face still wet with tears. "You gave her your ring," he said. "I did. That was kind, more than she deserved." "Maybe. But I needed to do it. For me, not her." She wiped her eyes. "I needed to know I helped her one last time so I could walk away clean." He sat beside her, taking her left hand and running his thumb over where the ring had been. "I'll get you another one." "You don't have to. I want to." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You're my wife, Mara. Not because I needed someone to fill a role, but because I chose you. I keep choosing you every day." Her breath caught. "Taza, let me finish, please." He was still holding her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "When Clara left, I thought I'd made a mistake. Thought I'd been stupid to think I could build something with someone who didn't want to build it back. And then you showed up, and you were everything she wasn't. Steady, strong, real." He paused, seeming to gather his words. "I'm not good at this. Talking about feelings. But you need to know, what we have, it's not just convenience anymore. At least not for me." "What is it then?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I don't know exactly. But it's important. You're important." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "And I want you to stay. Not because of Talon, not because we're legally married. Because I want you here. With me." The weight of what he was saying settled over her. This was a choice point, she realized. She could keep pretending this was just an arrangement, keep that safe distance. Or she could admit the truth, that somewhere along the way, she'd started wanting to be here too. "I'm already here," she said finally. "But do you want to be?" "Yes." The word came easier than she expected. "I do." His face transformed, a smile breaking through that she'd never seen before. It made him look younger, more open. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She found herself smiling back. "I know it's strange, we barely know each other really, but I feel more at home here than I ever did in town. More myself, does that make sense?" Perfect sense. He stood, pulling her up with him, and for a moment they just stood there, close enough that she could count his heartbeats. "I'm going to kiss you now, if that's okay." Her heart hammered. "Okay." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. But she didn't. When his lips met hers, it was gentle, questioning, nothing like the perfunctory kiss at their wedding. This was real. This was them choosing each other. When they pulled apart, Mara felt dizzy. Her whole body warmed despite the cold outside. "That was," she started, "worth waiting for?" "I was going to say unexpected, but yeah, that too." He laughed, actual laughter, and pulled her closer. "We should probably talk about this, about what it means." "Later," she said, surprising herself. "Right now, I just want to—" A knock at the door interrupted whatever she was going to say. They both froze. "You think she came back?" Mara asked. "If she did, I'm not answering." But Taza went to the window, looked out, and frowned. "It's Mrs. Patterson, and she's got someone with her." Mara's stomach dropped. Mrs. Patterson never made social calls, especially not in winter. If she was here, something was wrong. Taza opened the door. Mrs. Patterson stood on the porch with a young man Mara didn't recognize, mid-20s maybe, well-dressed, with Clara's blue eyes. "Mrs. Patterson," Taza said carefully, "what brings you out here?" "I'm sorry to intrude, Mr. Nantan, but this young man arrived in town this morning asking after Clara Whitlock. Said he's her brother." The world tilted. Mara stared at the stranger, her mind racing. They didn't have a brother. It had always been just her and Clara after their parents died. "I don't understand," she said. "We don't have a brother." The young man stepped forward, removing his hat. "Half-brother, actually, Michael Whitlock. Our father had a family before he married your mother. I only found out about you two after he died." "That's not possible." He would have said, "Would he?" Michael's smile was sad. "From what I've learned about Robert Whitlock, keeping secrets was kind of his specialty." Mrs. Patterson touched Mara's arm. "I wanted to bring him out here myself, make sure he was legitimate before he just showed up. I've seen his papers, birth certificate, letters from your father. It appears to be true." Mara felt like the ground was falling away beneath her feet. A brother, a half-brother she'd never known about. What else had her father hidden? "I'm not here to cause trouble," Michael said quickly. "I just wanted to meet my sisters. I've been traveling for months trying to find you, but when I got to town they said Clara was, well, that she'd left, and you'd married." He looked at Taza. "Mr. Nantan, I presume." "That's right." Taza's hand found Mara's back again, steadying her. "You've got timing, Mr. Whitlock. Clara was here less than an hour ago." Michael's eyes widened. "She was? Where did she go?" "Away," Mara said firmly. "And she's not coming back." "I see." He looked between them, clearly trying to piece together what had happened. "Look, I know this is a lot. A stranger showing up claiming to be family, but I have information about your father's estate, about money he left behind." "What money?" Mara asked. "He died owing more than he owned." "In town, yes, but he had investments back east, property, things he never told anyone about." Michael pulled papers from his coat. "When I settled his affairs, I found accounts in both your names, about $2,000 for each of you." The number was so absurd Mara almost laughed. $2,000? They'd been scraping by, Clara stealing money for a new dress, and all along there was $2,000 somewhere. "Why are you just telling us now?" Taza asked, his voice suspicious. "Because I just found out about it 6 months ago, and I've been trying to locate you since. It's not easy tracking people down when they've moved." He looked at Mara. "I went to the store where you worked. They said you'd gotten married and moved out here. Took me 3 tries to get directions anyone would give a stranger." Mrs. Patterson nodded. "I verified his story with the bank in St. Louis. The money's real. The accounts are in Mara and Clara's names, waiting to be claimed." $2,000. Enough to expand the ranch, buy more cattle, make improvements. Enough to secure their future, give talent opportunities. Enough to change everything. "What about Clara? Mara asked. "She gets the same amount?" "Yes, though I'll need to find her to distribute it." Michael glanced around. "Do you know where she went?" Mara thought about the ring she'd given Clara, the $20 that was supposed to get her to the next town. If she told Michael, Clara would get $2,000. Would it help her start over properly, or would she just blow through it in 6 months? "She didn't say," Mara lied, and felt Taza's hand squeeze her back gently in approval. "I'm sorry. I can't help you find her." "Well, I'll keep looking. In the meantime, I can start the process of transferring your portion if you're willing to sign some papers." "I need to think about this," Mara said. "It's a lot to take in." "Of course. I'm staying at the boarding house in town for another week. You can find me there." He put his hat back on, nodded to them both. "It was good to meet you, Mara. I'm sorry it's under such strange circumstances." After he and Mrs. Patterson left, Mara and Taza stood in the quiet house, trying to process what had just happened. "That was unexpected," Taza said finally. "That's one word for it." Mara sank into a chair. "A brother. Money. In the span of an hour, my whole understanding of my family just got rewritten." "You believe him?" "I don't know. Mrs. Patterson seemed to, and she's usually a good judge of character." She rubbed her temples. $2,000, Taza. That's more money than I ever thought I'd see in my life. It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. Ours, she corrected. We're married. It belongs to both of us. That's not how it works legally. I don't care how it works legally. I care about what's right. She looked up at him. You've given me a home, a family, a life. If this money is real, we split it. Use it for the ranch, for Talon's future, together. He crouched in front of her chair, taking both her hands. You don't owe me anything, Mara. I married you because I wanted to, not because I expected payment. I know, but I want to share this with you, the same way you've shared everything with me. She squeezed his hands. Partners, remember, that goes both ways. His expression softened. Partners. So we'll go to town next week, sign the papers, figure out what to do with the money. She took a shaky breath. And maybe get me a new ring while we're at it. Deal. He stood, pulling her up with him. But right now, I think we should just sit for a while. It's been a hell of a day. They settled on the sofa, Mara tucked against Taza's side in a way that would have seemed impossible just hours ago. Talon slept peacefully in his cradle, unaware of all the drama swirling around him. Do you think Clara will be okay? Mara asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe. She's got the ring money, and if Michael finds her, she'll have more. She'll survive. But will she be happy? That's up to her. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You can't fix her, Mara. You never could. She has to want to fix herself. He was right. She'd spent so many years trying to save Clara from herself, and all it had done was enable the worst parts of her sister's nature. Sometimes the kindest thing you could do was step back and let someone face their own consequences. I hope she figures it out, Mara said, for her sake. You're a better person than I am. I mostly just hope she stays away. Mara almost laughed. That too. They sat in comfortable silence as afternoon faded to evening. Outside, snow started falling again, covering Clara's wagon tracks, erasing the evidence that she'd ever been here. And inside, for the first time since that chaotic wedding day, Mara felt completely certain about where she was supposed to be. Not by default, not by obligation, by choice. The week after Clara left felt strange, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mara kept expecting her sister to come back, to cause more trouble, to refuse to stay gone. But the days passed quietly, the snow deepened, and Clara remained absent. Michael Whitlock, on the other hand, became a regular visitor. He rode out to the ranch 3 days after their first meeting, this time alone, carrying a leather satchel full of documents. Mara invited him in, though Taza watched him with the wariness of a man who'd learned not to trust easily. I know this is all overwhelming, Michael said, spreading papers across their kitchen table. But I wanted to show you everything I have. Proof that I'm who I say I am, and that the money's legitimate. Mara studied the documents. A birth certificate showing Michael Robert Whitlock, born in 1848 to Robert Whitlock and Margaret Hayes. Letters in her father's handwriting talking about a son back east, asking Margaret to keep the boy's existence quiet. Bank statements showing regular deposits to accounts in Mara and Clara's names, starting the year their mother died. He was sending money the whole time, Mara said, her voice hollow. While we were scraping by, barely making rent, he was putting money aside. I think he felt guilty, Michael offered, about the whole situation, about leaving my mother for yours, about having daughters he couldn't quite figure out how to take care of. So he threw money at the problem instead of actually being present. Taza's voice was hard. That's not parenting. No, Michael agreed. It's not. But it's what we got. Mara pushed the papers away, suddenly exhausted. Her father had been a ghost even when he was alive, distant, distracted, always working or drinking or finding excuses to be anywhere but home. She'd accepted that, built her life around his absence. But to learn he'd had a whole other family, that he'd been capable of caring enough to provide even if he couldn't show up, it made his neglect of her and Clara feel more deliberate, more personal. I need air, she said, standing abruptly. Excuse me. She walked out onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight against the cold. Behind her, she heard Michael say something and Taza respond, but the words were lost to the wind. The door opened a minute later. Taza came to stand beside her, not touching, just present. You okay? I don't know what I am. She stared out at the white expanse. I thought I'd made peace with my father being a terrible parent, but this, knowing he was capable of planning for our future, just not capable of being there for our present, it hurts differently. Yeah, it would. He leaned against the porch railing. But you know what? You turned out better than you had any right to, given what you had to work with. Did I? Or did I just learn to be invisible so I wouldn't be a burden? There's nothing invisible about you, Mara. Not anymore. He turned to look at her. You're the strongest person I know, and you didn't need him to become that. You did it on your own. She wanted to believe him. Some days she almost did. Michael seems genuine, she said, changing the subject. I don't think he's trying to cheat us. No, he seems honest. Probably got that from his mother. Taza glanced back at the house. Question is, what do you want to do about the money? I meant what I said before. It goes toward the ranch. Toward our future. Your future, you mean? If you wanted to leave, take that money and go somewhere else. Start fresh. I wouldn't stop you. Mara turned to stare at him. Is that what you think I want? I don't know what you want. We've been married 4 months, and most of that time I figured you were just making the best of a bad situation. And now? Now I'm terrified that you'll realize you have choices, and none of them include staying here with me. He said it matter-of-factly, but she could hear the fear underneath. She stepped closer, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the vulnerability in his eyes. I'm not leaving, Taza. I'm not Clara. When I commit to something, I stay. Even if staying is harder than going? Especially then. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I choose this. Every day, I choose this. You need to start believing that. He looked at their joined hands, then back at her face. I'm working on it. Work faster. She stood on her toes and kissed him, brief and sure. Now let's go deal with my surprised brother and figure out how to make this ranch everything it could be. They went back inside to find Michael playing with Talon, making silly faces that had the baby laughing. He looked up as they entered, a sheepish expression on his face. Sorry, I've never had a nephew before. It's kind of amazing. He's a good kid, Taza said, some of the hardness leaving his voice. Takes after his mother. The look he gave Mara made her chest warm. They spent the rest of the afternoon going over the financial details. Michael had already done most of the work, located the accounts, verified the funds, prepared the transfer paperwork. All Mara needed to do was sign, and the money would be hers within a month. What about Clara? Mara asked. You said her portion is the same as mine. It is, but I need to find her to distribute it. Michael hesitated. Do you know where she might have gone? Any friends or family she might contact? Mara thought about the ring, the $20, the desperate look on Clara's face. She could tell Michael about Santa Fe, about the man who'd abandoned her there, give him enough information to track her down. But Clara had made it clear she wanted a fresh start. And maybe, with $2,000, she could actually manage one. If Mara sent Michael after her now, told him about Santa Fe, Clara would just see it as Mara interfering again, trying to control her life. No, Mara said. I'm sorry. We weren't close. She never told me her plans. It wasn't quite a lie. Clara really hadn't told her anything. Michael looked disappointed but nodded. I'll keep searching. Maybe place some notices in newspapers in the larger towns. If she's still in the territory, someone might see them. After he left, Mara felt the weight of the secret pressing on her. She found Taza in the barn checking on the horses. I lied to him, she said. About Clara. I know. You think I should have told him about Santa Fe? I think you made the choice you can live with. That's all anyone can do. He closed the stall gate, turned to face her. You want Clara to have a real chance, one where you're not hovering over her, managing her life. That's fair. Is it? Or am I just being spiteful? Does it have to be one or the other? He crossed the barn floor, stopping in front of her. Maybe you're protecting yourself, making sure she can't use that money as an excuse to come back here and disrupt what we've built. That's not spite, Mara. That's survival. He was probably right. And if Clara wanted the money badly enough, she'd find a way to contact Michael herself. It wasn't Mara's responsibility to hand-deliver every opportunity. When did you get so wise? She asked. I've always been wise. You're just now noticing. She laughed and pushed his shoulder. Arrogant. That too. He caught her hand, pulling her closer. Come here. There's something I want to show you. He led her to the back of the barn, where a tarp covered something large in the corner. He pulled it back, revealing wood, pieces of furniture in various stages of construction. What is this? A crib, a real one, bigger than that cradle. Talon's getting too big for it anyway. He ran his hand over the smoothly sanded wood. And that's a bed frame. For you. The one you've got is terrible, and you deserve better. Mara stared at the furniture, at the care evident in every joint, every curve. When did you have time to do this? Evenings, mostly, after you go to sleep. He looked almost embarrassed. I wanted to surprise you. I'm surprised. She touched the crib railing, imagining it in the house, imagining Talon safe inside it. It's beautiful. You made this? My father taught me woodworking when I was a kid. Said every man should know how to build what he needs instead of depending on others. He glanced at her. I'm making other things too. A dresser for your room, a better table for the kitchen, things to make the house more comfortable. Taza. Her throat felt tight. You don't have to. I want to. Building things helps me think. And I like the idea of making stuff that'll last, that Talon will use someday, maybe pass down to his own kids. The future he was describing, it was real, solid, stretching out ahead of them. Not just survival, but actual life, family, legacy. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome. He covered the furniture back up. Should have the crib done by next week. The bed'll take longer, but... She kissed him, cutting off his words. Not gentle this time, but fierce, full of all the things she didn't know how to say. He made a surprised sound, then his arms came around her, pulling her close, and they were both laughing and kissing and tangled up in each other in a way that felt inevitable. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Taza rested his forehead against hers. We should probably talk about this, he said. About what? About the fact that I'm in love with you. Her heart stopped, then started again, faster. You're what? In love with you. He said it like it was obvious, like she should have known all along. Have been for a while now, just didn't know how to tell you. You could have started with Mara. I have feelings for you. That's boring. I figured just saying it was better. You're impossible. Yeah, he grinned. But you love me anyway, don't you? Did she? She searched herself for the answer and found it immediately, clear and certain. Yeah, she said. I really do. His smile could have lit the whole barn. Good. That makes this next part easier. What next part? The part where we stop sleeping in separate rooms and actually act like a married couple. Heat flooded her face. Taza. I'm not rushing you. I'm just saying, when you're ready, I'm ready. And I've been ready for a while. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Take your time. I'll wait. What if I don't want to wait? His eyes darkened. Then we should probably go back to the house. They did, walking through the cold evening air with their hands linked, not saying anything because words felt inadequate for what was shifting between them. Inside, Talon was awake in his cradle, babbling happily. Mara fed him, changed him, sang him to sleep with a lullaby Taza had taught her in Apache. Then she stood at the door to her small room, looking at the narrow bed, thinking about the larger one Taza was building for her, thinking about the fact that he had a perfectly good bed in his room that was big enough for two. She found him in the kitchen, washing the dinner dishes they'd abandoned earlier. He looked up as she entered, a question in his eyes. I'm ready, she said simply. You're sure? I'm sure. He dried his hands carefully, then held one out to her. She took it, and he led her to his room, their room now, she supposed. It was bigger than hers, with a real bed and a window that faced east to catch the sunrise. We can go slow, he said, or we can figure it out as we go. She started unbuttoning her dress, her fingers only shaking a little. We're good at that, figuring things out. He laughed, low and warm, and helped her with the buttons she couldn't reach. Yeah, we are. The winter passed in a blur of work and small joys. The money from Michael came through, and they used it carefully. New cattle to rebuild the herd, better equipment, improvements to the house and barn. Taza hired 2 ranch hands for the spring season, young men from town who needed work and didn't care that their boss was half Apache. Mara's greenhouse flourished, providing fresh vegetables even in the coldest months. She started selling the surplus in town, earning extra money that she carefully recorded in the ranch ledger. Mrs. Patterson became a regular customer and an unexpected friend, stopping by the ranch once a month with news and gossip. Talon grew, hitting every milestone right on schedule. First words at 10 months, Mama and Dada, within the same week. First steps at 11 months, wobbling across the kitchen floor into Taza's waiting arms. His first birthday in January, celebrated with a cake Mara made and presents Taza had carved from wood. They heard nothing from Clara. Michael had placed advertisements in newspapers across 3 territories offering to help her claim her inheritance, but she never responded. Eventually, he gave up searching and left Clara's portion of the money in a trust, accessible if she ever came forward. "You think she's okay?" Taza asked one night as they lay in bed listening to the wind. "I think she's Clara," Mara said. "She'll land on her feet somehow. She always does. And if she doesn't, then that's her choice to make. I can't save her, Taza. I tried for years, and all it did was hurt us both." She rolled over to face him. "I have to let her go." "That's hard." "Yeah, but so is holding on to someone who doesn't want to be held." He pulled her closer, and she settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This was what mattered. Not Clara, not the past, not all the what-ifs and maybes. Just this. A warm bed, a man she loved, a child sleeping peacefully down the hall, a home they'd built together from nothing. Spring came with wildflowers and new calves and work that stretched from dawn to well past dark. Mara learned to ride properly, spent hours in the saddle checking fence lines and moving cattle. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned, her body stronger than it had ever been. One afternoon in early April, she was in the greenhouse transplanting tomato seedlings when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun, expecting to see Mrs. Patterson, or maybe Michael, who still visited occasionally. But it wasn't either of them. It was a woman Mara didn't recognize, maybe 40 years old, with graying hair and a kind face. She climbed down from the wagon carefully, like her joints hurt. "Can I help you?" Mara called, walking to meet her. "I hope so. I'm looking for Mara Nantan." The woman's voice was soft, educated. "I was told she lives here." "That's me." "Oh, good. I'm Margaret Hayes." She said it like the name should mean something. When Mara just looked blank, she added, "Michael's mother." Understanding crashed over Mara. This was her father's first wife. Or not wife, maybe. The documents hadn't been clear on whether they'd ever married. "I didn't know you were coming," Mara said carefully. "I should have written ahead. I apologize." Margaret looked around at the ranch, taking in the neat barn, the well-maintained fences, the house with smoke curling from the chimney. "Michael told me about you, about how you've built a life out here. I wanted to see for myself." "Why?" "Because you're my son's sister. That makes you important to me." She met Mara's eyes directly. "And because I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For Robert. For the mess he made of all our lives." Margaret's voice was steady but sad. "I knew he'd married your mother, knew he had daughters with her. I should have reached out, should have tried to help. But I was angry and hurt, and I let that keep me from doing the right thing." Mara didn't know what to say. She'd expected a lot of things from this conversation, but an apology wasn't one of them. "You don't owe me anything," she said finally. "Maybe not, but I'm giving it anyway." Margaret glanced toward the house. "Michael says you have a son. I'd love to meet him, if that's all right." They walked to the house together, talking carefully about safe topics, the weather, the ranch, Michael's life back east. Inside, Taza was on the floor with Talon, building towers from wooden blocks so the baby could knock them down. He stood when they entered, his expression guarded. Mara made introductions, watching Taza relax slightly when Margaret greeted him with genuine respect. "Your son is beautiful," Margaret said, watching Talon. "May I?" At Mara's nod, she sat on the floor, joints protesting audibly, and offered Talon a block. He took it, studied her seriously for a moment, then smiled and babbled something incomprehensible. "He likes you," Mara said. "Children usually do. I raised 4 of them, Michael and 3 daughters, all grown now, scattered across the country. Margaret helped Talon stack 2 blocks. Being a mother was the best thing I ever did, even when it was hard. Something in her tone made Mara ask, "Was it hard with Michael?" "Sometimes, raising him alone, people judging me for having a child out of wedlock. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat." She looked up at Mara. "Michael told me about your sister, about what happened at the wedding. That must have been difficult." "It was, but it worked out." Mara felt Taza's hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. Better than it would have, probably. Life's funny that way. The things that seem like disasters in the moment often turn out to be blessings. They talked for another hour, easier now, finding common ground. Margaret told stories about Michael as a child, about Robert's rare visits and rarer moments of genuine fatherhood. She didn't excuse his behavior, didn't try to make him into something he wasn't. Just presented the facts and let Mara draw her own conclusions. When Margaret stood to leave, she hugged Mara, brief but genuine. "You have my address if you ever want to write or visit. Michael would love to know his nephew properly." "I'd like that," Mara said, surprised to find she meant it. After Margaret left, Taza found Mara standing on the porch, watching the wagon disappear into the distance. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, I think I am." She leaned against him. "It's strange. I spent so many years angry at my father for not being there, and now I'm meeting all these people who knew him differently, who he was different with. It doesn't change what he did to me and Clara, but it makes it less personal somehow. He was just a flawed man doing the best he could." "Which wasn't very good." "No," Taza agreed, "but you turned out fine despite him. That's what matters." She thought about that as spring turned to summer, as the ranch prospered and Talon grew, and their life together became more solid, more real. She'd spent so much of her life defined by what she lacked: a present father, a caring sister, a clear place in the world. But she'd built something anyway. Not despite those lacks, but almost because of them. She'd learned to be strong because she'd had to be. Learned to be resourceful, independent, unwilling to quit. And now she had Taza, who valued those exact qualities, who saw her strength and matched it with his own, who built her furniture and kissed her like she was precious and argued with her when she was wrong and stood beside her when she was right. In July, Mrs. Patterson brought news that made Mara's heart clench. A woman matching Claire's description had been seen in Santa Fe, working at a dress shop, going by a different name. "I thought you'd want to know," Mrs. Patterson said, "in case you wanted to contact her." Mara thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No, but thank you for telling me." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. If Clara wants to reach out, she knows where I am. Until then, I'm letting her live her life and I'm living mine." Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. "Good for you, girl. You can't save everyone." "No," Mara agreed. "You really can't." That night, she told Taza about the news. He listened quietly, then asked, "You want to send word to Michael? Let him know where she is?" "I don't know. What do you think?" "I think she's been surviving this long without our help. Another few months won't hurt her." He paused. "But if it bothers you, not telling him, then we should send word." Mara considered it. Part of her wanted Clara to have access to that money, to have every possible advantage. But another part, the part that was learning to protect herself instead of always sacrificing, wanted to leave well enough alone. "We'll wait," she decided. If she's working, she's supporting herself. That's more than she managed when she was here. Maybe struggling is teaching her something. Or maybe she's just moved on to a different kind of mess. Maybe, but that's not my problem anymore. It felt good to say it, to mean it. August brought scorching heat and a drought that had everyone worried. But Taza had planned ahead, rotating pastures carefully, ensuring the cattle had access to the spring that never ran dry. Other ranchers weren't so lucky, and Taza spent several days helping neighbors move their herds to better water sources. "You didn't have to do that," Mara said when he came home exhausted. "They're your competition. They're my neighbors, and when I needed help during the sickness, some of them showed up. You help people when you can. That's how communities survive." She loved him more for that, for seeing the bigger picture, for understanding that success didn't mean others had to fail. In September, Michael rode out with news that changed everything. I found her, he said, spreading out papers on their table. Clara, she's in Santa Fe, like you heard, working at a dress shop, living in a boarding house. She's using the name Claire Worth. Mara's chest tightened. How did you find her? I hired a detective, someone who specializes in locating people who don't want to be found. He looked apologetic. I know you said you didn't know where she was, but I had a hunch about Santa Fe based on some things Mrs. Patterson mentioned. I'm sorry if I overstepped. It's fine. The money's hers legally. She has a right to claim it. Mara kept her voice level. Did you contact her? I did. Sent a letter through the dress shop. She wrote back. He pulled out an envelope, Claire's handwriting unmistakable. She wants the money. Asked me to handle the transfer without involving you. Said it would be easier that way. Of course she did. One last slap, one final way to say that Mara was irrelevant to her life. Then do it, Mara said. Give her the money. Close out the accounts. I'm done. Mara, Taza started. No, it's fine. I am done, Taza. She made her choice. I'm making mine. She looked at Michael. However you need to handle this, do it. I'll sign whatever papers you need, but I don't want to see or talk to her or know anything about what she does with the money. Can you manage that? I can. Michael's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry, I know this must be hard. It was hard the first time she abandoned me. This is just confirmation that nothing's changed. Mara stood. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on Talon. She escaped to the bedroom where Talon was napping in his beautiful new crib. She stood there watching him sleep until Taza came in behind her. You all right? He asked quietly. I will be. I just need a minute. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. She doesn't deserve you. Never did. I know. And you're better off without her constantly disappointing you. I know that too. Then why are you crying? She reached up to touch her face, surprised to find it wet. Because even though I'm better off, even though I know she's poison, part of me still wishes things were different. Still wishes I had a sister who actually cared about me. You do have people who care about you. Me, Talon, Mrs. Patterson, Michael and his mother. We're your family, now. I know. She turned in his arms, burying her face against his chest. I know. And I'm grateful. But it still hurts. Yeah, it does. He held her while she cried, not trying to fix it or minimize it, just being present. When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, he kissed her forehead. Better? Getting there. Good, because Talon's waking up, and he's going to need you. She looked over to see Talon stirring, his little face scrunching up in pre-cry mode. She went to him, lifting him up, breathing in his baby smell. Hey, little man, did you have a good nap? He grabbed her hair, yanking hard enough to hurt. She laughed and untangled his fingers. We need to teach you gentle, she said, before you're big enough to actually hurt someone. He's got your determination, Taza said from the doorway. Once he grabs something, he doesn't let go. Is that a good thing? With the right person? Yeah, it's the best thing. Michael stayed for dinner, then headed back to town with Mara's signed authorization to transfer Claire's money. After he left, Mara and Taza sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. You think we'll ever hear from her again? Taza asked. Probably not. Unless she needs something. Mara leaned her head on his shoulder. But that's okay. I have everything I need right here. Everything? Well, maybe a few more cows wouldn't hurt. He laughed. I'll see what I can do. The months rolled forward. Michael transferred Claire's money and wrote to say she'd claimed it without incident. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that she'd asked him to tell Mara she was sorry for everything. But the apology felt hollow, second-hand, too little and too late. Mara filed it away with all the other disappointments Clara had delivered over the years and moved on. Winter came again, their second together. This time Mara knew what to expect, was prepared for the cold and the isolation. But it didn't feel isolating anymore. It felt cozy. The three of them tucked into their warm house, while the world outside froze. Talon's second birthday arrived in January with another cake, more presents, and a party that included Mrs. Patterson, Michael, and several ranch hands who'd become friends, It was small, simple, nothing fancy. It was perfect. That night, after everyone had gone and Talon was asleep, Mara stood at the kitchen window washing dishes and watching snow fall. Taza came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Very." She leaned back against him. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought I'd be." He pressed a kiss to her neck. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About expanding the house, adding another bedroom." Her hand stilled in the dishwater. "Why would we need another bedroom?" "Well, Talon's getting bigger. He'll need more space eventually. And I thought maybe—" He turned her to face him. Maybe he could use a brother or sister. Her heart started pounding. "Taza, I know we've never talked about it, but I want more kids with you, Mara. Want to build a real family, if you want that too." Did she? She searched herself for the answer, imagining another baby, the chaos and joy and exhaustion that would come with it. Imagining Talon as a big brother, the house full of noise and life. "Yeah," she said softly. "I want that too." His smile was brilliant. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She kissed him, deep and sure. "Let's build something big and messy and loud. Let's fill this house with family." "Starting now?" "Well, we should probably finish the dishes first." He picked her up, making her shriek with laughter, and carried her toward their bedroom. Dishes can wait. Spring arrived with wildflowers and new beginnings. Mara discovered she was pregnant in April, confirmed by the doctor in town who congratulated her and told her to take it easy. Taking it easy wasn't in her nature, but she tried. Taza helped, taking on more of the physical work around the ranch, while Mara focused on the greenhouse and the books. He started building the addition to the house, working evenings and weekends to get it done before the baby arrived. One afternoon in May, Mara was in town picking up supplies when she saw her. Clara, or Claire or whatever she was calling herself now, standing outside the general store looking at fabric in the window. For a moment, Mara couldn't move. Her sister looked different, thinner, harder, her clothes nice but not extravagant. She looked tired, used. Then Clara turned and saw her. The world stopped. They stared at each other across 20 feet of dusty street, two women who used to share everything, now strangers. Mara waited for the anger, the hurt, the familiar ache of disappointment, but all she felt was distance. Clara was just another person now, someone she used to know. Not worth hating, not worth crying over, just past. Clara opened her mouth like she might say something, but Mara turned away, walked into the store, and didn't look back. When she came out 15 minutes later, Clara was gone. She told Taza about it that night. "How did it feel?" he asked. "Seeing her?" "Like looking at a photograph of someone I used to be friends with. Familiar, but distant." She took his hand. "I didn't feel anything, Taza, and that feels like freedom." "Good." He squeezed her fingers. "You deserve freedom. From her, from the past, from all of it." The baby arrived in December, a daughter they named Sarah after Taza's mother. She had Mara's light eyes and Taza's dark hair, and she screamed like she was furious at the world. "She's perfect," Mara whispered, exhausted and euphoric. "She's loud," Taza said, but he was smiling. "Takes after her mother." Talon was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to touch her constantly, bringing her his favorite toys. He was gentle with her in a way that made Mara's heart ache. "Good brother," she told him. "You're such a good brother." They settled into new rhythms, harder than before but somehow richer. 2 children, a thriving ranch, a home they'd built from nothing. Some days Mara could barely keep her eyes open, exhaustion pulling at her bones. But even on the hardest days, she was happy. She was home. The years unfolded. Sarah grew into a wild, fearless child who climbed everything and feared nothing. Talon became quieter, more thoughtful, already showing signs of his father's intensity and his mother's determination. They fought and laughed and played, filling the house with noise exactly like Mara had wanted. The ranch prospered. Taza hired more hands, expanded the herd, built a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Mara's greenhouse became locally famous. her vegetables sought after in 3 towns. She started teaching other women how to grow year-round, sharing her knowledge freely. They heard nothing more from Clara. Occasionally someone would mention seeing her in Santa Fe and Albuquerque, always working some job, always alone. Mara stopped asking. It didn't matter anymore where Clara was or what she was doing. Michael became a regular part of their lives, visiting several times a year, bringing gifts for the children and news from back east. He never married, seemed content with his bachelor life and his work, but he loved being Uncle Michael, and the children adored him. Margaret visited too, less often, but always welcome. She and Mara developed an unlikely friendship, writing letters back and forth about children and gardens and the small joys of daily life. 5 years after that chaotic wedding, Mara stood on the porch of her home, watching Talon and Sarah chase chickens in the yard. The house had grown, 2 more bedrooms, a proper parlor, a bigger kitchen. The barn had been rebuilt, twice as large as before. The greenhouse now had a partner structure on the other side of the house. Everything looked different. Everything looked right. Taza came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against him with the ease of long practice. "You thinking about her?" he asked. He didn't need to specify who. "No, I was thinking about us. About how far we've come." "We've come pretty far. From strangers at a ruined wedding to this." She gestured at the ranch, the children, the life they'd built. "It's more than I ever imagined." "You regret any of it?" "Not even a little." She turned in his arms, looking up at his face. It was more weathered now, lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, but still the face that had chosen her when she needed choosing most. "I love you." "I love you too." He kissed her, familiar and sweet. "Even when you're bossy." "Especially when I'm bossy." "Especially then," he agreed. Sarah shrieked with laughter as she caught one of the chickens, and Talon whooped encouragement. The sound was pure joy, uninhibited and bright. "We should probably rescue those chickens," Mara said. "Probably." But neither of them moved. They just stood there, wrapped in each other, watching their children play in the yard of the home they'd made. This was what mattered, not where they'd started or what they'd lost along the way. Just this. The family they'd chosen, the life they'd built, the love they'd forged from necessity and made real through choice. Somewhere, maybe Clara was finding her own version of peace. Mara hoped so, genuinely. But it didn't matter either way. Clara's happiness or unhappiness wasn't Mara's responsibility anymore. Her responsibility was here. These children, this man, this land. And she was exactly where she needed to be. Not invisible, not overlooked, not second choice. Just Mara Nantan, ranch wife, mother, partner. Strong because she'd had to be. Happy because she'd chosen to be. Finally, completely, undeniably home.